Live and ready to go?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we are live.
Oh, good evening to the Electric Utility City Commission meeting at the Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. Too many twos today. You ready to go? Could you call the roll, please?
Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Herman Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga.
Here.
Commissioner Christopher McVoy.
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here. Thank you. And although I, for a brief moment, had a chance to lay the pledge, I will give that. I was going to do it when you were here. Oh, I never get to do it. You go ahead. You do it. You do it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
I have none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, before we get started, I just want to do, I have something I want to say. I have been listening carefully to a lot, you were talking about net solar and solar energy and rooftop solar. I've been listening to a lot of the conversations, and I've been reading a little bit up on it and doing some of my own research. And in 2012, I was really glad to see that Commissioner McVoy was able, to see facts and see things differently, because you did support the cap, a different cap, but support a cap on solar in 2012. So you've come around now to a different. And so I'm saying, I've been thinking, and I spoke with, nothing's articulate as I like to be. I had a long meeting with the city manager and with Mr. Liberty last week. I said, what's going on here? And from what I'm gleaning from that conversation and from what I've been hearing and doing my little research and listening to people, it seems that whatever ban has been or limit has been imposed, a lot of that had to do with the fact that our infrastructure was so shaky. Mr. Liberty, in the past few years that he's been here, one of his, his focus is to strengthen it up, to shore it up, to get it stronger, to get it less, less burnouts, less blackouts. According to Mr. Liberty, because over the 5 or so years that he's been here, he feels that at this point in time, the chance of, and we still only have the one timeline. So that was the other reason for ban, okay? Because if we burnt out, we were dead. The timeline is going to be in, hopefully, by the end of next year, 2023. So from what I'm hearing, we have a situation where, number one, the original reason for it has, to a large extent, been remedied. And number two, so the risk is less than it was. And number two, the time that we will be exposed to that risk, because there now is a plan for a second timeline that's coming in the end of the year and the next year. The two things: the fact that the structure is stronger and there's less of a chance of a breakdown that Mr. Liberty was worried about, and number two, the fact that it's a shorter, we have an amount of time that we know that we're going to be at that risk. I'm sort of changing my mind, and I think that it might be, and only after speaking with our expert. There's a certain risk that with one timeline and the solar people, people coming on with solar, there is a risk. So there's two things. If we as a commission are willing to take that risk, slight though it might be, number one, and number two, well, we're going to have to talk about the finances of solar at some point, because it's going to have an impact on our income. But so I'm suggesting that we either bring it back at this next utility meeting, either as a formed ordinance or resolution, or bring it up for discussion, but get it on and get it started. I have not felt comfortable until this conversation, and now I do feel much more comfortable about it. So I've had a change of heart, and I would just like to put it on the next agenda.
So I think the long and short of what you're saying is that you are in favor of lifting the cap on rooftop solar in the city.
Yes.
Okay, well, I would join you on that.
Well, I did. Seriously. I've been listening to what you said. No, I've been listening to what you said, but again, I'm very supportive of our staff and I trust the information that we get from them. And I sat down, Mr. Liberty and Carmen gave me about an hour and a half last week. I said, well, let's get down to it. And after having listened to it, and again, there's a risk. There's a risk, but I'm sure that the risk is much less than it was a few years ago. The other part of this conversation is going to have to be financial at some point. Because at some point, with solar getting more, common and more popular, we're going to have to deal with the fact that we're going to lose some income from the electric utility. And I don't want people 30 years from now saying, didn't they think of this? So that's like part two. We've got to kind of figure out at some point, not tomorrow, how we either recoup. We're going to either have to recoup that income somewhere or cut services. But that's a discussion. If we want to go ahead with the solar, yes, I'm saying let's put it on.
And if I might comment on that, I appreciate that these discussions have happened, and I think it definitely is the right direction to go to remove the cap and just let that go. I don't think we're going to be overrun by solar.
I agree. That's
At any, we're at about 1.5% roughly of our generating capacity at this point. Systems around the country and around the world start getting a little more nervous when you hit 10%.
Yeah,
because it's starting.
but it's going to be, if we
Yeah.
see, we only have like a year and a half to worry about it.
Right.
Until the second tie line comes in.
And
And in that time, people will be thinking about it, financing it, planning
Permits.
it,
Right.
shopping it.
so I'm all for doing that. And I think the other aspect that you've alluded to, Madam Mayor, is utility, not just us, all utilities are moving toward thinking both about the technical challenges that come with a very different model of
Mhm.
generation, much more distributed, much more variable generation, and the economic aspects of how do we work this out in a way that covers the costs that need to be covered, keep the grid going, keep the staff going, and still allow people to do.
Yeah, and get some income
So
to run the
it's-
city. And I mean, right now, everyone, we know this is, there's a certain subsidy going on now because our minimum rate that we charge people to just keep the system there, because it has to be there. We're only getting about 75% of that
That's correct.
cost. So we are subsidizing, and the more solar people hook on, we're going to be subsidizing more. So I think, I don't think, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see the impact right away, but at some point, we're going to have the utility take a look and see from year to year what's going on with our finances, because then we're going to, at some point, and it's a good hit in the sense of solar. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
But for paving the roads and paying our salaries of our staff, it's not such a good thing. So we've got to find a balance at some point. Do we have agreement to consensus to do that?
Are we bringing back a discussion or a?
I don't know. What's your
I
pleasure?
would, I think I can't speak for everybody else, but I think we're far enough along that it could be a resolution. Simply
Well,
lifting the cap.
I agree with lifting the cap. Are we going to raise the minimum
No.
rate on, so
No.
all the new people that are going to come on after we lift the cap are gonna be kind of in there, they're gonna be able to not pay their share of the grid.
They'll have to pay the minimum.
Subsidizing it.
They'll have to make-
So we're gonna continue subsidizing the new people.
Exactly, right, yeah. It's no difference, and from my understanding, it's no difference in terms of, we all pay the minimum, there's a minimum that you have to pay.
But do we want to consider increasing that so that as we see more and more and more people come on, that we aren't losing money?
We are losing money now,
Well,
but
right, we're
losing more
now,
money, right?
And then the more people that come on, I think, the people that bought it under certain expectations,
Mhm.
I think that's great. And then as people are moving to the future and they're going to be buying, investing, I think we should be very clear up front what we need from them to make this a reality.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, no, that's very good to hear.
And I think that is important. However, when you look around, I just saw something today that Lawrence Livermore Lab out in California did an economic study on some of this, and some of the concern about is somebody subsidizing some of this is somewhat overstretched a little bit.
Well, we
It's
have the
not-
number.
but it is definitely, and it's one thing that this might be a time for us to, not necessarily with this resolution,
Right.
but as we're going forward, we need an integrated resources plan for the utility that looks at the full suite, things behind the meter. We know that bidirectional charging with electric vehicles is going to be coming. We know the charging stations as a part of that demand response. We're going to hear more about that tonight. There are a number of things that are coming, and they do have economic implications, and we need to work that. And we need to, as we invest in our system, we need to make sure that everything we're doing is setting us up so that we can
Well, there's plan B. Yeah, we have to come
move
up.
forward both financially and technically,
Right.
do as much renewable as possible.
Right, Herman,
Well, if this is under additions and
no, it's just, I just wanted to get it.
then in the interest of interest of information to the public, I would like to hear Mr. Liberty's response so that the public is.
You don't think they should take my word for it?
I'm just interested in
We hear you've applied for.
passing on the information that you got and extending it to the public.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Liberty, you're on.
Good evening. For the record, Ed Liberty, Electric Utility Director. Just to provide some background, there are actually two caps that are in place. The current cap is a temporary cap on new installations. We currently have a limit of 1.5% of system peak. It's not 1.5% of installed generation because our installed generation is substantially less than our system peak.
Yeah.
So it's 1.5% of system peak. So it's 1.5% of 97.2. The second cap is a 10 kW cap. That cap was in place, from what we could tell in records, as you've indicated, back to the 2012 timeframe. We don't know if it goes back before then, but net metering became law in Florida around 2009. And at that time, the legislature required that the cities implement net metering programs, or at least allow it, and institute interconnection agreements, which we did not have until 2019 when we put interconnection agreements in place. So the first cap we're suggesting that we remove, with understanding the risk, that the risk hasn't gone to zero, but it's greatly diminished from where we were in 2019 when we suggested the cap, is remove the 1.5% cap. So customers can begin planning now to add systems, and some customers may be able to do it this year and enjoy the tax benefits this year. The second cap that has to be discussed is whether you want to stay at a 10 kW cap. The state's program allows for systems up to 2,000 kW in what we call tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Lake Worth Beach only has a tier 1 program. I don't personally know why, but it's been in place since at least 2012. And we're following that. There were some systems that were installed that were greater than that without requisite approvals, but they got through the net somehow, and they're out there. But we currently have a limited 10 kW when we turn this back on. The way to correct this is through resolution. We can certainly bring forward a discussion item at the next meeting. In order to implement this, if we're going to go through higher tiers, we have to create interconnection agreements. So there's more work to be done, but we could certainly, I know this is not the forum tonight for a vote, we can have a more detailed discussion at the next meeting and then follow that up with a subsequent appropriate resolution. We can work with council.
And I would suggest that if we're able to do that, just time-wise, if the resolution was available, even though it's a utility issue, to bring it onto, if we all agree to bring it onto a regular commission meeting, if it can be done a little bit quicker. I don't know what your time frame is.
Removing the limit of 1.5% can be done very quickly.
Okay.
That can be done as quickly as the next meeting that you want us to bring it to. But moving to tier 2 and tier 3 would require us to create the interconnection agreements to support that. And there's some debate that has to take place in there because there's things like insurance requirements we have decided. If you were to ask us to go to tier 2 or tier 3, you'd have to have a policy discussion on what insurance requirements you have, because those are optional in that tier 2 and tier 3 program.
So we're
And of
not
course, we
removing.
can have an economic discussion as well if you chose to. There's a lot of things to discuss, but the moving off of the 1.5% cap, we can do as quickly as the next meeting and have a brief
Okay.
resolution.
And 10K is, how much is a house? How much is a house use? I mean, what's 10K?
A typical home is under 10 kilowatts.
Okay.
Most homes in the range probably 3 to 9
Oh, okay.
kilowatts, 3 to
So
10.
It's not that limiting.
I think it accommodates the vast majority of the homes.
Okay. Great. Can we get something on the next agenda, perhaps? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your, oh, there's so many lights all over the place. Sarah, I'm sorry.
Mr. Liberty, I know that you're probably very versed in what's happening up at Tallahassee in regards.
I was gonna just bring that up.
For the people who are listening,
Right. It's horrible.
there could be legislature coming down that would predate them and the net metering and how it could change. Could you just talk on that for a brief moment?
Sure. This is a very controversial, is the third rail of energy engineering. And
But I just want people who
economics.
don't know to know what could be coming down the pipeline.
So what most people refer to as rooftop solar or net metering began as an attempt by regulators to incent customer development of renewable owned systems, renewable generation systems that were customer owned. In many cases, we call that rooftop solar, which is where the vast majority of these are showing up. Many states, I think I've heard numbers in excess of 40 states in the country. In my experience in consulting, I certainly saw many states where this was done. They have what are referred to as net metering programs. Under net metering programs, a customer installs a system on a rooftop or anywhere on their property that's connected behind their meter, is able to net out how much they produce versus how much they consume. That netting is called net metering. And there's a lot of debate as to whether that is truly a fair economic metering. There's a lot of people on one side of the argument that say it's an outright subsidy, and it in fact clearly is. On the other side, people say, but it's certainly good for the environment, and it certainly is. Both are true. What's at stake right now in the state of Florida, and is also being challenged in California. So Florida and California are really at the forefront of this discussion right now as to whether net metering in concept should be modified somehow. The other advantage of these renewable energy systems is that customers enjoy some rather significant tax benefits from investing in this technology and installing in their homes, in addition to the net metering benefits. So it's a policy debate, and that's what's happening in Tallahassee right now. It's really a policy debate as to how much longer should this subsidy of net in the net metering as it exists today exist, or should it be modified? I've seen some documents in the press that they say that they would grandfather existing installations for either 10 years or 20 years. So that if you already have a system, you would be able to get net meter under the current rules for, let's say, 20 years into the future. But if you install a new system sometime after this legislation is passed, if it passes, by the way, there's no guarantee it will be passed, that would apply. What we have to also consider is, certainly, do we want to continue that as a policy decision? But it's not yet clear to me that within the law that's being debated in Tallahassee, that it might not be applicable to municipal utilities.
Oh.
You know, council has looked at it. The current interpretation is that may not be applicable to us. So even if Tallahassee changes it, it would be applicable certainly to the investor-owned utilities, but possibly not to a municipal utility. That would remain a policy matter that would be determined by you folks who sit in.
Pardon my cynicism, but the minute they realized they didn't apply it to municipal power.
Now that they just heard you.
Right, thanks a lot. No, we listened to some of the debates about this up there, and there were a lot of the small solar companies up there just, you're killing us. This will kill us. So I hope, but for our purposes, we're talking about not the 10K, because that's still okay, but the 1.5.
Correct, yeah, that
Okay.
1.5%.
And at some point, we'll look at the 10K if we have.
Right, and that we have put in place had nothing to do with economics.
Right.
Due to our concern for the risk
Yeah.
that it posed to the operation of the system in what we refer to as an island operation. When the city's operating an island and we have under frequency events that we're trying to keep the system stable, it adds to the instability. Our feeling right now is that we've made a number of improvements to our system, which greatly reduce the likelihood of having to do an island operation at all.
Great.
So it hasn't taken it and say, well, the risk is zero. The risk is lower than it was, but if we have an under frequency situation and an instability, we could damage our equipment. Part of the difficulty for us, the public that's listening, is that our equipment is so aged, 1965 to 1975 vintage equipment, that it wasn't designed to operate in those types of situations very well. And under frequency operations are a very significant problem in the generation business. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it can have some severe consequences. There's a lot of literature you can do, Google search or Bing search or anything you want to search on, and look at under frequency operation effect on generators. This is something that's not going to go away in the industry, though. This is something that is very much a factor in intermittent resources, particularly solar and wind. Now in Florida, we don't have a lot of wind, but we do and will have a lot more solar than we have today. So the nature of solar electric generation is substantially different than large spinning pieces of equipment. It has to do with inertia and being able to support frequency. The reason it's less of a risk for us going forward or near zero risk, ultimately when we get a second timeline, is that it'll be very, very rare that we ever need to do a complete island operation because we'll be supported by two separate timelines.
And for those out there, an island operation is when our extension cord from FP&L gets cut. And we're gonna have two extension cords soon. So if one gets cut, we have the other one.
Correct. No, on a normal-
Electricity for idiots is kind of where I'm coming from.
I wouldn't put it that way, but
Oh, thank you.
but with two timelines, we will be operating lines in parallel. So we'll always have one standing by, if you will, and energy will be flowing into the city from both at any given time. Measured correctly, it'll flow from both, and power will flow through our system on the way to others outside the city as well.
And I have to say, we have to thank you for getting that started because apparently that's something that could have, should have, would have been done a long time ago to make us less vulnerable. Thank you for doing that.
Well,
Okay, I see two lights. Vice Mayor Robinson.
I just want to point out that governments subsidize oil, tobacco, coal, and some other things. And
We don't.
if Lake Worth Beach is accused of subsidizing solar, that's not a bad thing. And the other question is, have the candidates spoken to you? The candidates, three districts, it's District 4 candidates spoken to you, so that if this is going to come soon.
Maybe they could take care of that themselves if they wanted to speak with Mr. Liberty. I'm sure he's available.
I'm just hoping they do.
Well,
I am always available to speak with any candidate, and generally speaking, almost anybody in the public who wants to have a conversation about this subject. We're a small enough organization.
he loves to teach us about
We can certainly.
Yeah.
So if any of the candidates want to speak to me about this subject or any other subject, you know how to find me and be more than glad to.
Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, I just was going to clarify that I would agree with Director Liberty that separate out the issue of the
Right.
number of installations cap from the capacity cap, the 10
Okay.
kilowatts. I also would agree very much with what Commissioner Robinson mentioned, that we as a society choose to subsidize all sorts of things, often to quite extensive amounts. And at this point in human history and human technology, subsidizing renewable energy rather than subsidizing something that puts carbon or methane into the air is certainly a wise thing.
And at some point, we're gonna have to look at it. I mean, it's just a fact of wait, and it may not be us, but I think we need
Well,
the groundwork.
I think we're all in agreement.
Yeah.
We should definitely put some effort into an integrated resource plan for the utility
Right.
that deals with all these variable generators.
So on the, do you,
Yes,
does our city attorney feel like you could do a quick resolution?
Yeah, the resolution we brought before you last meeting, where the issue came up about the current.
Right. So just amend it.
Just, we could just revise
Just
that,
cut and
take
paste.
out the 1.5. There you go.
You snip it, it works.
Just cut and paste like we all do. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So now, and I appreciate you guys' tolerance for letting me bring that up.
You went rogue.
I went rogue, baby. But I hope it was, I thought it would sort of be helpful. I want to try to,
I just have a quick process question. Will this be reflected in our minutes with a link to the time so that people want to go back and there's some documentation that we had
Sure.
this discussion?
sure. I'm sure that will happen. Madam
Yes.
Clerk,
Madam Mayor.
thank you.
No,
I think that we have had a policy that was imposed fairly carefully at times that electric matters we should do at the electric.
So we'll do
meetings.
that then.
So I
Okay,
would
so we'll bring it in.
suggest we do it.
I appreciate that. I know that you're sort of anxious to do this. So I appreciate for you. All right, Mr. McVoy says it's okay if we wait till the next utility meeting. Public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda. Do we have any public comments, ma'am?
Did we vote on the agenda?
No, we didn't. Can I have a motion on the approving the agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Yes?
I have one.
Okay, I forgot to have a vote on the agenda, and I was going to ask for a motion to vote on the agenda.
My apologies.
No,
Motion to approve.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, let's hear the comment.
My comment is from Michael Anthel. He's at 111 Southwest Martin Downs Boulevard in Palm City, Florida. Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, my name is Michael Anthel, and I am a current president of the Florida Energy Storage Association. I am writing this evening to applaud your decision to begin examining a demand response program for the Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility. As distributed energy resources find themselves under attack in Tallahassee, your potential leadership in implementing a demand response program is to be commended and encouraged. Demand response has the potential to save the ratepayers of Lake Worth Beach money and also provide a financially responsible path for your utility to encourage distributed energy resources. If there is anything I can do to help your efforts, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Oh,
I have a motion by Commissioner Legge, a second by Commissioner McFoy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes. Now we have unfinished business item A, the Electric Utility Conservation Program. Mr. Liberty?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and we will be joined by a guest speaker from the Utility Advisory Board, Randy Stevens, sitting in for Chair, who's not able to be here tonight. As a prelude and introduction to discussion, some months ago, this commission had asked that we take a look at a utility conservation fund or utility conservation program. We then charged staff and the advisory board to take a look at this. So the advisory board has done a whole bunch of work. They've met with great passion and energy. They probably had about 4 or 5 meetings that have all gone from 2 to 4 hours, I think, in length, with a lot of good discussion. Staff has supported that. We've taken the position that we're not here to block a conservation program. We're here to provide information that might be helpful, but let the community and the advisory board really bring forward what they'd like to see in the conservation program. Let me clarify one further issue with regards to demand response programs, which a lot of people view as a form of conservation. A demand response program is a program by which the utility remotely turns off devices in your business or your premise, such as a hot water heater or an air conditioner or a pool pump, something like that, during periods of peak demand in order to reduce the demand on the system. However, what it does is it really shifts the energy use from one period of time to a later period of time, because your home might get a little bit warmer than that period of time, and then you cool it off a little bit later, or you don't heat hot water and have it heat a bit later. So it doesn't really reduce the amount of energy, it just shifts the time period in which it happens. The concept of demand response was to allow utility operators literally a push button that would be the equivalent of starting up a generator. So instead of starting up a generator, we're just going to reduce demand for some period of time. And we're going to try to compensate the reduction in demand at the same rate or similar rate to what we would pay to build a new generator. It's not truly the same because you haven't built a new generator to take care of increased demand. You're just saying I'm going to rely on it, demand control, by shutting off things remotely. There's a lot of debate as to whether that's a good way to go or not, but the reality of it is there are conservation programs or demand response programs rather that are in use all over the country, including here in Florida. They are not uncommon, but it doesn't completely negate the need to have capacity to make generation. The other part of the issue is you have to take into account, well, if I push this button and unplug or rather disconnect 50 or 100 or 5,000 hot water heaters, were they actually running at the time that I pushed that button? So we had to take a look at the time of day when you hit your peaks. We're getting into a lot of those discussions about demand response programs.
So the city would have the ability to literally turn off my hot water heater, not my house?
Correct. And that's typically, that's only done on a voluntary basis, by the way, by customers who volunteer to enroll in the program. So this is actually done in neighboring utilities. It's not unusual. Customers will volunteer.
That seems so technologically amazing.
And they receive, the utility will have equipment installed at the home or the business where this is going to happen. And it's programmed into the button on the console or a keystroke in the console, which is the operator's ability to do that. And the customer, in exchange for that, receives a monetary incentive. So the utility pays the cost of installing the equipment and then has a monthly monetary incentive, which is paid to the customer in order to have this utility ability to do this. Some utilities use it, many do, many do not. Our operators have not felt the need to have this type of thing, but there's obviously a clamor and a hue in the community to have such a program. It's our current operating preference or desire. You know, we haven't said, gee, but if we had one of these, we would be better off. We haven't been in that situation. As we look forward, we'll talk about resource plans. If there's a misconception that we don't have a resource plan, we in fact do have a resource plan. We put it together in 2018. It was not a fully integrated resource plan because it looked at a very, very high level conservation, or rather demand response. We're often using the term, but demand response doesn't negate the need to add conservation for generation on a macro basis. For example, you wouldn't say that, well, because I now have a demand response program, I don't need to have a whole bunch of new solar generation.
Okay.
We added 36 plus megawatts of solar generation following that resource plan that we developed in 2018, and also started work on getting a second timeline that far back. But is there a role for demand response? Possibly. We'll have to take a look at the economics. People look over the fence and say, hey, XYZ utility nearby gives customers $5 per month per device. Okay, where does that money come from? Are there savings that tie to that? If you have 3 devices, you're getting $15 a month or $10 for 2 devices. Are you saving enough money to make up for that, or you just raise the rates to give people that benefit?
Right.
The truth lies somewhere in between. There are probably some savings, but does it completely support that payment? We have to take a look at that for our system. The bigger issue, I think, where the bigger opportunity lies, is in the area of conservation. That's an area where the Utility Advisory Board has been looking very closely. I should probably just turn it over to.
I see Commissioner McVoy's light on. Do you have a question? I don't.
No, just a comment that to add to some of what Director Liberty mentions, the biggest that I know of in the world demand response system is right next to us. FP&L has the largest program doing that, which gives you some idea that it is obviously, even at an economic level, not a crazy idea at all. And as we move forward, and this is why, and Director Liberty referred to it very correctly, that an integrated resource plan thinks about the behind the meter aspects, the control aspects like demand response, full picture, and dealing with variable renewable sources, which do bring technical, it's very different, as Ed referred to, with spinning devices have inertia. They do a much easier job of keeping frequencies and phase and things like that automatically. Now we do that electronically with inverters that can also mimic that quite well. But we want to make sure that as we're moving forward, that our plan is very oriented towards pulling in these kind of things.
Okay.
And we're not quite there yet.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep with the, I should probably have said wait till the end, but that's
So,
okay.
Let me clarify something on demand response programs. I wasn't aware that FBL had one of the biggest ones in the country, but certainly they have a very large one. What effectively, I can't speak to FBL's specific financial driver, but what's typically done in the industry, what regulators do, and public service commissions, is they incent the utility to use a demand response program. So you create we typically talk about megawatts of supply in our plant. If you create a megawatt, right, we will incent you at a rate that's similar to what we would have incented you to build the next megawatt of capacity. So 1 megawatt of demand reduction would be something that they could invest in, meaning they're going to build the infrastructure to be able to do that, to actually shut people's equipment off remotely, and they're going to build the infrastructure to pay them to do that every month. And that economic reward is to that, to the large utility doing it, which could be FPL, could be any other utility in the country, they structures. They're being rewarded as if they had built a new megawatt of generation. And then they have incentive to install X number of systems. It doesn't mean that it's free. It doesn't mean it's completely paying for itself. It means that they've been allowed to put that into their rate base and earn on that investment that they're making in the infrastructure. I'm not going to say it's dollar for dollar. I don't know the true economics deep down within each of their programs, but that's the underlying premise. Rather than give utilities an incentive to continue to build and build and build, because they put that capital dollar into their rate base and they earn a rate of return, typically in the range of say 8.5% to 10.5% return on investment. They instead create the infrastructure to remove a megawatt of demand, and they earn at the same rate. The question is, how receptive our customers, are they going to stay on a program and realize that the utility does in fact intend to use it?
Right.
You're not going to pay out for something that you don't intend to use. So if you're having your power interrupted to these devices, not to the home, but to these specific devices on a frequent basis, is that what the customer wants? That's why it has to be voluntary.
Yeah.
And how many customers will like to remain in the program? Will they remain in the program long enough for you to get your investment back out?
Right.
So there is experience-based data out there that we don't have, that the larger consulting firms may have that whole structure of program. So these are all things that have to be taken into account. I wouldn't rule it out, but we look into the future and we say down the road, we're going to have some portion of our power plant infrastructure retired.
Okay.
How are we going to replace it? Are we going to replace it with demand response programs? I don't think so. Typically, demand response programs, you might target a couple of percent. It's a small percentage of your total load.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, well, thank you. So let's keep going with the presentation. I'm sure we can dig deeper in some, yeah. Thank you.
He's sitting there so patient.
He's been very patient. Mr. Ramsey.
Oh, thank you, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Very exciting discussion to hear. So as Director Liberty said, I will be presenting our recommendations from our advisory board, specifically on an energy conservation program. So can you all see my screen now?
Yep,
If it's a beautiful picture.
we're
of
in
a-
California or Italy or
You've transported us.
France.
Okay, great. All right.
There we go.
All right, so as the director said, we were set up by resolution back in
Hang on,
October.
Ramsey. Anthony, oh. How do we close those boxes so we can see everything that's up there? Thank you. Never mind. Okay, go ahead.
How about that? Okay, so we were established by Resolution 76, 2021 last year by all of you to develop an energy conservation program based on industry-wide best practices. We met 4 times starting on November 3rd, and we solicited feedback from the community, the commission, and city staff. I want to specifically thank all of you who participated with us. I really want to thank Director Liberty. He's been fantastic throughout this process. And I'd also like to specifically thank Director William Waters. He was also incredibly helpful. Our discussions included a pretty intensive review of the previous energy conservation program in detail. We looked specifically at that program's offerings, staffing, cost, and outcomes. We did develop kind of a broad sense of consensus priorities that we oriented ourselves around. The first of which was avoid policy actions that would create undue rate pressure. So we were really sensitive. The whole point of this is to help our customers, help our community. So we didn't really want to do something that, while it may sound good or look good, was really going to end up just costing us all more over term. By extension, we wanted to avoid economically regressive policies. So we really didn't want to do things that would take from people who were relatively well off or not well off and give to people who relatively are. We wanted to identify policies with attractive returns on investment for individual ratepayers, especially those in need, our community at large collectively, and the utility/city general fund. And we wanted to identify policies that equitably result in both carbon footprint and utility bill reductions. So we took energy conservation to kind of mean both a financial conservation and carbon reduction. We discussed a lot of things, everything from different types of roof paint to parking regulations. And we came up with a small list of recommendations, but we think they're pretty substantial and would go a long way. So we're hoping you'll take action on them. The first of which is just promoting the free energy audits and energy data that we as a city already provide and have. So specifically, we recommend that all apartment buildings that consist of 4 or more units, so really all commercial rentals, undergo a free utility provided energy audit every 3 years during their inspection period or at time of sale. Yet again, I'm going to emphasize that this is a free audit, so requiring it really shouldn't be perceived by anyone as being unnecessarily onerous. This is just making sure that people get the data they should get to make intelligent investment decisions. We also recommend that the utility start more proactively, but privately reaching out to customers who have comparatively, or that is relatively large utility bills in comparison to equivalent properties. So in other words, you may live in a home that is an energy hog and you just may not know it. And this would be a way to let people know, hey, you may need to call for one of the free energy audits and figure out what's going on. And then by extension, we also recommend that the utility start more proactively pinging people when there are irregular usages in their consumption. So in other words, if you have a leak or something strange happens and you all of a sudden are consuming a lot more power or water, find out sooner than later, not necessarily having to wait for the bill period to come to an end. Secondly, we really recommend the leveraging of grants and outside financing. Specifically, we recommend engaging a nonprofit energy efficiency program manager to promote outside grants and financing for utility customers. For example, the Solar Energy Loan Fund, who I understand you're all familiar with from a previous presentation, does this for municipalities throughout the state, and notably our very close neighbor, Martin County. So we actually specifically encourage the commission to, at a minimum, direct staff to issue an RFI for this. Good opportunity to just figure out what's out there. And we also encourage the city/utility to explore engaging grant writers at large who focus on environmental, clean energy, and green building projects. As I think you all know, there's just a lot of money out there right now from the American Recovery Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we could be accessing if we had the partners to go after. Next is improving code and procurement. So we recommend that the city encourage projects with environmental impacts wherever possible in our building code and procurement practices. Specifically, we first recommend that the commission ask the Department of Sustainability to develop code and sustainable bonus program changes designed to encourage lower carbon footprints from new buildings. The board also recommends that the city and the CRA take carbon footprint and positive environmental impacts into account when selecting projects through competitive procurements. Obviously, you've all discussed this one at length tonight, but we do recommend that you explore demand response formally and at a minimum issue an RFI for it. These programs incentivize energy conservation. They create a price signal for energy storage resources, specifically electric vehicles. I mean, it's very exciting to think about a future that's actually really already here for some people, where you park your electric vehicle in and you get paid to charge or discharge it at certain times of the day. Obviously, demand response can help manage grid frequency, that is issues related or issues created from distributed energy resources. And it, of course, helps ensure that peak capacity isn't higher or costlier than necessary over time. It's also worth highlighting that the Environmental Defense Fund considers demand response the quote unquote killer application of the smart grid. They mean that as a good thing, right? That they really say, hey, if you're going to have a smart grid, you have to have demand response. And they also go on to say that if we're ever going to achieve the 100% carbon neutrality or even negativity that we as a country so desperately need to achieve, we have to have a smart grid to get there. It's also worth highlighting that the recent bipartisan infrastructure bill formally amends the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act to specifically promote the use of demand response and demand flexibility practices by commercial, residential, and industrial consumers, and that specifically applies to municipal utilities like ourselves. By extension, we also are recommending that you require charging stations, specifically bi-directional charging stations, right? So people can discharge and get paid for those discharge events for all single-family construction and in other types of construction wherever possible. This will ensure that we are supporting the adoption of electric vehicles, but also their use as a grid resource for our utility wherever possible. It's really important to highlight that the cost of adding a charging station during new construction is marginal, specifically for single-family homes. We're talking between as little as $250 to $1,500. So when building a new home, this is really not an onerous requirement, and it becomes an economically sound requirement because, yet again, this ensures that that new homes are ready for electric vehicles that can participate in the demand response market, and of course, generate meaningful savings on gasoline for their owners. Our last one, this is definitely the one that I personally am the most passionate about, is we formally recommend that the City Commission implement a formal program for ongoing investments, continuous investments in our citywide shade canopy. So we talked a lot about, how do we facilitate energy conservation equitably, right? And the reality is that there's just no better way to do that than through increased communal shade canopy, right? Shade trees have been shown by the USDA Forest Service to result in energy savings between 20 and 50% a year for buildings that they're planted around. They also do broader heat island mitigation. They obviously result in energy savings in terms of consumption from the shade, but they themselves are carbon sinks. And this is not in any way, shape, or form something that is, way out in left field. The Sacramento Municipal Utility District, one of the larger electric municipal utilities in California, proactively invest in shade trees all the time, and they are not alone. So I really hope this is one that we will give extra consideration to, because just the number of financial and, I want to say, fiduciarily responsible outcomes that result from shade trees just cannot be emphasized enough. So in terms of next steps, we continue to remain at your disposal and staffs to help identify further policies or the ways to implement these policies in more detail to support the economic and environmental sustainability of our entire community. And with that, I say thank you, and I really appreciate your patience this evening.
I want to thank you. And thank the board and the staff for putting that together. I mean, all of these things sound, I wish they would have planted shade trees on Dixie Highway 30 years ago when they planted some yellow tabs. But sounds good. I mean, I don't know do we currently have an assessment, an audit program?
Yes.
I'm asking.
Yes, Mayor, we do. We have an audit program in place. It's been in place for, I think over a decade.
What does that consist of? If I called us an energy audit, what is that?
We have, I currently have 2 auditors on staff who will come out to your premises. We can do small commercial, not process commercial.
Mostly from residential.
Mostly residential. And take a look at the home, take a look at the windows, the air conditioning system, the age of the infrastructure, insulation of the attic, look for air leaks, and give the customer a pretty good assessment of the types of things that they could do to significantly reduce their energy bill. And we look at water conservation as well. We're in the process of migrating over to an online tool so that customers can do this for themselves using the online tool. However, if they don't feel comfortable using the online tool, we'll do what we call the concierge service. So we'll use the online tool by asking questions over the phone. If the customer doesn't feel comfortable having us come into their home, we can certainly do a drive-by. Most of the things that we need to know, or we can tell from the outside, are causing you high energy costs. We can see from the outside.
Okay.
The only thing we can't see from the outside is insulation in your attic.
Right.
But it's a pretty good look by just thinking, when is your air conditioner replaced? Do you have window shaders? Do you have single pane windows?
But you would go up into the attic?
Absolutely, we take a look at the attic, yes.
Okay.
We go on the premises, we do.
Thanks.
So we give the customer the option to go one way or the other. We help them out.
I see a couple lights on. Let's ask for some questions. Mr. McBoy, I think you were first.
I was just going to say that, does everybody, of the things we heard, I believe 6 different recommendations. Well, let me say before even that, I'm very impressed with the work and the talent that we have in our own community to research these things and come up with industry-wide best practices. I'm also very pleased at the focus on not just the energy side and the environmental side, but focusing on the economic benefit to consumers, to the utility, to the city, because they're all closely tied together.
Right.
And looking for synergies between those 2 objectives. So I guess my question to my fellow commissioners is, do we see anything that we don't like in that list, or are we pretty comfortable with the list?
Okay, let's see what Commissioner Malia has to say. I think that's a big question.
And then I'll follow up.
I too want to say thank you to the Electric Utility Board for putting their time and due diligence in, and staff. I'm in support of everything that's been brought up. I will say that I did take advantage of the free audit when I first opened our place of business
Oh.
10 years ago. My bill was over $1,800 a month. And with the help of the audit, which took, I think, 3 days by the time they unplugged and plugged in, and some great recommendations during the hottest months, we're down to around $1,100.
Wow,
So it does work.
wow.
It's there. It was free. I mean, and the advice that was given was beneficial to help me stay in business. So it is there, and I encourage businesses to take advantage of it. It worked really well for us.
As
But
far
I'm in
as,
support of everything.
okay, that,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm an electric vehicle owner, so let's do it.
Yeah, and when electric vehicles get affordable, I'll be happy to buy one. Okay, so Commissioner Stokes, do you have any comments? Do you like the items that they listed?
Yes, I like all the items. I'm in love with the shade tree one.
Me too.
It's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
They're all very exciting. I would like to learn a little bit more about the variety of like who is building new single family homes in our city, and does it make sense for every single one of them to have
Right.
one? And if it's truly $250, but then
I wish they would have put one in my house when they built it.
yeah, but I there's so many different lot sizes and stuff, like,
Yeah.
is it even, like, I'm guessing they can apply for a waiver or something if there's something weird about their lot size where.
Yeah, that's the one that I have a little hesitation about, because it is kind of a demand for something that if I build a house, I should be able to decide if I want to put in a thing or not. That's-
Yeah, I think as long, if it doesn't, if really, there's like one-off property or something where it just really doesn't make sense, then you allow people to apply for waivers, and then
Was that one of the things that they put in a single family home?
any single family, any new construction of a single family
Right.
home, and yeah, so $250 to $1,500, it doesn't seem like a big burden financially, but I just do wonder if we have like a 25-foot lot size and they have street parking and then.
Does it make sense? Yeah, because you're not gonna run your extension cord across the sidewalk and plug it into your house to plug into your car.
Which it's interesting because it brings up the other, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but it brings up the other thing where people are saying we shouldn't have minimum parking for new construction because people shouldn't use cars anymore. So if you're gonna have, you have to have a parking space in order to have a place to plug in that very expensive electric vehicle.
Yeah, so I would like to, I very much support it, because I think we want to provide, it's the future, all that stuff. I just want to make sure that our boards and everybody else have very clear directions on when and when not a waiver would make sense.
Thank you.
Because we have that stuff all the time. And then what was the thing that we talked a lot about earlier?
Demand response.
So that one is like, I haven't thought about that before.
Yeah.
So that one, I think, as we were talking earlier, I was like, oh, this feels like we need to have a discussion around it. I mean, we're gonna put out an RFI on it. What was it?
That's not one of the issues that's a suggestion, but that's not one of the.
It is one of the recommendations, and their suggestion was issue a request for information on that one to see how it would apply here.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Woodbury?
Sure, it's always good to get information on what things,
Okay.
what it entails, what it
Okay.
involves, and what the costs might be and the benefits.
And that would only work for electric hot water heaters, right?
Correct. Correct. The devices that are typically put on demand response are the electric hot water heater, the pool pump, and the HVAC
Oh, okay.
compressor, which is the high energy user.
And as far as the trees, anyone that knows where I live knows that I am a great contributor to the tree canopy of the city of Lake Worth Beach.
And it really is gonna help us make us more equitable.
Oh, it's wonderful. Listen,
There's like not a bad thing about it.
The funny thing is-
Aaron Cita and our horticulturist, like one of my first months here, saying, how can we expand our tree?
and the tree board has given out, I think they have a
Yes.
map of like where the trees have gone. I just have to say it's meaning nothing. When we talk about regaining the tree canopy, when I first started coming here in 1967, there was no tree canopy. There was no, it was very, I mean, there's a couple in town, like little yards that are just completely cement. I mean, there really was, my sister and I talk about it, it's like, we're not gonna restore, we're creating a tree, which is, I'm all for, but it's
Yeah.
just funny because it was all, if you had a palm tree, that was okay. So, and I see, Ma'am Davis is light on. We'd like to hear from our city manager.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to comment on the question regarding the shade trees as well as the charging stations and new housing developments. And so I think if we want to consider those, I think that was a very interesting recommendation. We can also share those recommendations with the Department of Community Sustainability to get their input on that
Sure.
prior to instituting the recommendation, just to get their input as to how that could be folded into our current plans and policies.
It's funny, I have 3 giant ficus trees in my front yard, and very often either police officers or there'll be 2 or 3 people parked in front of my house just using the shade for their lunch breaks or to make phone calls and stuff. I'm like, you're good. I love people.
No, and you're right. I mean, like when I walk here from my house.
Yeah.
I have to like go from one side of the
Yep.
sidewalk, across the street, go over there just to stay in the shade because it's just not something that's plentiful in the city.
So, okay, do we have a consensus, Chair? Mr. McCoy? Just when you thought it was safe to ask for a consensus.
And you're completely right about the not regaining the canopy. This was pine flatwoods originally, so it was very unshady.
They cut it all down.
But it's fine for us to rebuild.
Right, I think,
something
yeah.
that
So-
enhances it. The only thing I would propose is that if we're all fairly comfortable with most of it, with some caveats, like we
Mhm.
need a waiver procedure if there's some extreme circumstances on the electric charging thing. I would suggest that we take advantage of the expertise that's been developed and say, hey, would you guys on the board draft us up a draft resolution that would then go to.
Oh, I think we're gonna leave that. I think we should leave the drafting to
The
the.
attorneys.
Well, I think the attorney and I actually had a conversation related to this. She says that her environmental engineering degree hasn't arrived, as my legal degree hasn't arrived either. I would say let the board come up with the content and let the attorney, of course, the attorney has to review it, as should community sustainability, review the things, but you've got most of the knowledge right there. Let them come up with the first draft. Make sure it passes muster at the legal level and.
Well, I mean, I think what you're
And then bring it
asking,
back
I
to us.
think what you're asking the board to do is not actually draft the whole thing, but define and organize and.
Provide the raw materials.
Well, no, the things that they are, the 6 items, with the caveats. The whole here to, wherefore, whereas.
Yeah, all that stuff.
And
Quite good.
whereas.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think it would be helpful if the advisory board were to give some more substance to the
Exactly.
recommendation. Because as Carmen Davis mentioned, we need to sort of vet these through,
Mhm.
like community sustainability, and look at each of these to see how they may impact departments. Community sustainability, you're probably talking about an ordinance change.
Right.
At least a resolution
Yeah.
change for the sustainable bonus program and things like that, and figure out what we can do, and how we can implement.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a process started where you're gonna turn over to the electric board, which Mr. Liberty, give us more meat, give us more detail, and you guys will run it through the different departments and bring it back.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
beautiful. Oh, not yet. Mr. Liberty, one last word.
I just wanted to let you and the public know that we already have a requirement for electric vehicle chargers
Oh.
in your higher density housing. For
Oh,
example, we happen to have been in a conversation with the Gulfstream today about their plans. And Code for Sustainability shared that the requirement is 4% of the parking spaces have to have electric vehicle charging capability.
Oh,
I'm not sure at how many units that rule kicks in at. Williams' team and Aaron could certainly speak to that, but some of this is already in your codes. It doesn't go all the way down to the single residential home
Right.
yet. But in the multi-family situation, apartment complexes, for example, that's already in there.
yeah, we've seen them in the plans that come to us. There are a couple.
And the city itself, for example, at the Bohemian garage, we are installing or providing electric vehicle chargers. They're installing some of their own for the residents only. But in the public section of the garage, we're adding vehicle chargers as well.
And I think I've heard there are grants available for cities to get money to do
Mhm.
charging stations somewhere in the halls of Tallahassee.
There are grants available. Getting them is an entirely different exercise.
Because you have to be accessible to like I-95 and there's like 17 requirements where they have to be.
Correct.
Am I right?
So the first round of grants, as I understand it, actually came out of the Volkswagen Dieselgate
Oh, yeah.
The dollars were distributed by the federal government to the states. And then the states then opted to run their own programs, to determine how they were going to do this. They're going to aim it at electric vehicle charging stations. Much of it went to the major arteries, the interstates, and
Oh,
facilities that were within, I believe, 1 mile of an exit ramp that also had shopping or food or other activities that you could do. We actually did submit an application and we were rejected, but we did submit an application.
That was for Fun Zone, wasn't it? Or Fun Depot?
That was one of the ones that we pursued.
Yeah, I was
We
gonna say
also
that
looked at
10th Avenue.
6th Avenue South, near the current 6th Avenue
Sure.
substation. Across the street, the developer, the commercial developer in that area, actually volunteered to allow us to build infrastructure on his property. So we submitted that. We were rejected on that.
Sad.
Try.
So we have tried. The point of the grant writing, we actually think that we need either a person, I would suggest an outside firm, whose job would be every day wake up and go find a grant for us.
Oh, please, don't get me started.
So we.
They're sick of hearing me say that.
We're talking about it, just electric utility infrastructure is a huge area we need to go after, but in the energy and environment area, that's a whole other area that we need to go after.
You need to go after many more
It's
grants.
very difficult for staff to just remain proficient and current and educated with all the potential grants that are out there. Understand how to write these things to hit the sweet spot, right? To get to the center of the bullseye to actually get a reward. That's a skill set. And there's people who are expert at that. We don't have that person on our staff. We might be better off engaging a firm to do it for us.
We're going to become much more aggressive about grants and
Right.
financing this year. Says Betty. Says me. Okay, item B, discussion of draft in-city community solar RFP. Mr. Liberty?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So a number of months ago, we were charged with creating an RFP to seek responses for an in-city community solar program.
Mhm.
So we did in fact create that, but you have here tonight in the package is a draft of that. Absent any substantive changes, it's our intention to release that within the next, looking to Valentina from Procurement. Within a week or, let's say a couple of weeks, give us a little margin here, but it's virtually ready to go. We took the language literally word for word out of the request that had started as a resolution and then didn't go as a resolution, but it was a consensus of the group that asked us to do it. So that's what's in this document.
Okay.
What we do need to add to the document is a list of the in-city properties. We thought that would be helpful to potential respondents that
To know.
rather than them have to figure out where are your properties, that we would give them a list of the properties that we think are applicable. So that list is on the document that needs to be attached.
Thank you. Are there any public comment cards on this, ma'am? Madam Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great. And there's no one in the audience to do that. So let me just see. Is this a motion to approve?
No, I had some discussion on it before we get that far, if I could.
Okay, but, all right, but there, I mean, we have to do a motion to approve this, correct? It's not just a discussion.
No, this is a new business item.
Okay.
We haven't specifically put a motion out there. I'm not sure that we actually need a motion.
Right, that's what I'm wondering, right, just procedurally.
Yeah, most RFPs for the city are done administratively.
Mhm.
So this one's brought from your comments.
Oh, okay,
So if there's consensus direction to move forward, that'll suffice.
okay, I see Mr. Boyd's light on. Mr. Boyd?
Yeah, I'm very glad to see that we're moving forward with the idea of an RFP. I like very much the language that was put at the front describing our system and some of the characteristics, and the sourcing of our energy, all very helpful. Reading through the project directives, I'm mostly in Exhibit A, which is 2 pages. My only concern, a couple of specific concerns, is that I think we narrowed the scope quite a bit more. And I would suggest that we not do that. The original intent was definitely a piece of that intent was to have visible solar. Exhibit A, I want to say out of memory, it was like pages 24 and 25. After a lot of it. Exhibit A usually in RFPs is.
It's
the
page
scope of work.
18 on the bottom.
Thank you.
Says 18, yes, it does.
This is simple.
Definitely an element of it was have visible solar installations. I remember Commissioner Malega was particularly inclined that direction. I certainly am also, as you know, that we are doing something on this. We also mentioned that we would like to see battery storage in it. I would not make that a requirement. I would make that an encouragement that the applicant would get extra points if they can build battery storage into it. But I wouldn't make it a requirement for the whole system. The other aspect is the visible part. There was a recognition when we talked about it before that serves a certain function of indicating our commitment to doing this, but we recognize that the amount of actual juice that would be generated would be pretty small. And that's why we included in the original resolution to include both at the landfill, where we do have control.
It says visibly cited right here. It's on the second paragraph where you're reading.
Mhm.
On page 19.
Yeah, no, right here, page 18, visibly cited. See?
Yeah. No, I know the visibly cited is fine. I wouldn't limit it to that. Right now, it implies to the applicant that, well, if I'm not doing anything that's visibly cited, then I'm out of luck. And I don't think that's our intent. Certainly wasn't my intent.
I commented, we were very, very careful in staff to not change the language of the documents that were submitted to us on the resolution. We followed, looking at procurement, and council, we stuck to what we were asked to do.
Okay.
Well, as the person who wrote that document, I can tell you quite a bit about the intent.
Right, and we can hold up side by side, be glad to do that, we probably should.
No, just,
But the point is that staff has not attempted to narrow the scope in any way.
this is as you got it.
We took the instruction that we were given,
Okay.
we copied and pasted that language into the
And
document.
frankly, sometimes rooftop solar is not the prettiest thing you want to look at in a historical building either.
And obviously we would need, and I think that's a good suggestion that was made. Hey, let's add a list of what buildings, and obviously if the building is historic and our code says you can't do it, we need to let people know that that's off limits.
So the landfill will be on that list?
The landfill needs to be on that list as a potential location.
And let me add to that, it's not our intention to remove any property other than, for example, maybe a substation where we intend to do a rebuild of the substation. But we intend to give them a list of all of the city-owned properties as we know them that are in city.
Mhm.
So that bidders can decide whether if it has a building on it, they can then evaluate whether they want to put something on the roof. If it's a parking lot, they can look at it and say, do they want to put something in the parking?
Sure.
If it's a landfill, we don't want to rule out anything other than the substation, but we know we're going to do construction. That sure, it wouldn't be practical to have overhead.
Yeah.
I
So
don't,
say, these are the properties that the marketplace tell us what's possible.
yeah. My question, the landfill already,
I was gonna say, is there anything to put on the landfill?
we
Yeah.
have but would that then go into the general electricity? We have, so I don't know, why would we put in a landfill if we have solar in the landfill already?
Because it's about the third to a fourth of the space that's available there.
So these roofs, just so I understand this, so like if we put a solar for the city hall, we get a solar ability to do it. That solar energy will also just go into the electric city utility. It's not a separate standalone net metered device. It would go straight into our electricity. The power would come from the sun, but the power would go into the electric utility. Is that correct?
That's likely, but it would be up to the bidders and what they respond.
Okay.
Because it was suggested that these devices should have battery backup. So
Okay, right.
how they're going to respond, I don't know. My assumption is that they would do it.
Okay, all right, that answers my question.
If it was on the landfill, it would go directly into the city's grid. You'd have no city building. on it.
Right, exactly. That was my question.
It would interconnect into the grid. And there is additional space on the landfill.
Okay, all right.
If somebody wanted to build on it, they have to figure out how to do that.
So on
That's what the
page-
market will do.
On page 1819, do we need to just amend that language a little bit to make it clear that if it's not roof-based, so.
I think the landfill should be specifically mentioned as one of the locations.
Okay, hang on. As somebody who's talked to the people in the community, they're not interested in having a building on the landfill. So are we talking about adding more fields?
That's not a
Or
Well,
building.
somebody,
Or solar panels. Not a
Mr.
building.
Liberty just said if somebody wanted to build a building and put on the
No.
landfill. So I want to make very clear that we're only talking about adding more panels
At this point, right?
to the solar farm that's already there.
And I
Correct.
would add an additional thing, which I very much specified, because I had a lot of involvement with that landfill and the community in the past. I don't know whether Director Liberty knows this, but when we did the Siemens performance contract that built the first round of solar panels there, we specifically wrote in, you cannot puncture the cap on that.
Oh,
mountain
yeah.
Because there were odor issues.
That's
that
why
were a major deal.
that's why I'm stating, we're not building anything and putting rooftop solar on. We're gonna, it's to be able to add
Panels
solar
at the
farm.
solar farm.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is different from that. Doesn't have anything to do.
And in putting on the solar panel, I just want to, we gotta get going. In putting on the solar panels, you can't penetrate the thing.
Right,
That,
You never should.
that is an unusual requirement because of the history of that, and that should be, anybody bidding should be aware of that requirement.
It's actually quite the norm. There are many projects for solar built on landfills in Northeast, which I'm a big and remain a big proponent of. But it's quite the norm to build on a landfill.
Okay.
It's a very good use of a landfill.
As long as you don't penetrate
As
the,
long as you don't penetrate the cap, that's not always specified because it's not always an issue. In this case, it is, so that should be, and it
Okay.
it changes the cost requirement, so it's worth making sure that we
But
specify.
what we didn't want to do was get into going beyond listing the properties and then saying that this is the limitation on this property. The bidder is going to figure out themselves whether for example, we'll put this building on the list. I don't know personally if this roof will take the 3 pounds per square foot load of solar panels, nor the category 5 requirement on the code for wind strength. But that's not for me to decide.
right, but I
Would be for the
think
bidders
what
to figure
Commissioner
out
McVoy is saying, and I really want to, we gotta get going, we got people, we gotta talk about customer service, soon. The most fun. Is that for the landfill, which is an unusual situation, that we put a line in as a part of, don't come to us with a suggestion that penetrates the
cap.
Like a heads up.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's an important heads up. It was a big deal in the community, has been for many years, and it's something that we should honor. And it's only fair to the bidder to be aware of that. So I would add that the landfill be included with that clarification. I would also be careful of the language that includes battery storage. I would say that it's encouraged to have it, but not necessarily a requirement. And certainly not in all locations. So that would be, see, because as you look at the minimum project requirements, number 2 on page 19, it says respondents must provide solar solutions that include battery storage. Well, that's not very ambiguous. That does not.
That was our understanding from the language in the draft that we were given to start this.
I would do that for at least some of the systems. I would be fine with it with the smaller visible ones. I would not necessarily make it a requirement. I'd certainly say if they think they can do it economically, for instance, at a larger landfill one, by all means do it. But I would not hold it as a requirement. I think it unnecessarily prescribes it when there's no need.
I don't disagree. I just want the public to know we didn't come up with that restriction. That was the document that we started with.
Okay,
We can
clarify.
The consensus of the organization is to change that. We'd certainly change that.
I would change that.
I'm fine changing it.
The other,
But including the encouragement part.
Right.
Yeah.
so the landfill needs to be included with the cap requirement in 1, change 2 to be an encouragement. Get extra points for it. The other one that came up in the discussions when we discussed this before was that a big aspect of community solar around the country, community solar programs, is the billing aspect, that it gives customers the option to say, look, I want to purchase all of my power from a renewable source, and I want to know that's where it's coming from. And that, and Director Liberty has pointed out, well, we have solar coming from the purchase power agreements that are coming, but we do not have a separate way of billing that would let people focus their energy on that. An associated piece of community solar programs, as we heard in the presentation, is to encourage new solar. I think we might want to expand a little bit the billing aspect of this, because that's something that would be a help to the utility if there was a way to let customers have that option of dedicated solar, whether it comes from the fields up in the middle of the state, whether it comes from landfill, whether it comes from buildings on the roof, which I think that would make sense to see if anybody's out there that wants to bite on that. So that would be.
But what's the point in, I don't mean to interrupt, but what's the point in them biting it if we don't have those capabilities as of yet with billing?
That's exactly something that folks have bid on.
Is
There are
doing,
companies
is
that-
creating the billing for that?
Yeah. And
Don't we already have a
I
billing?
think, isn't there gonna be a time where people can opt for solar?
Right, so let's clarify. Our billing system as it exists today does not allow us to give customers an option of, let's say, our current fuel charge or PCA, which is where this type of transaction will reside, or a specialized menu. We don't have the à la carte option.
Right.
We have the fixed price all-in menu.
Right.
It's our intention to rebuild the billing system with a new billing system, which will allow customers the flexibility to choose option A or option B. What's not clear to me is what's the intention of this community solar program, or what might the people in the market propose? Who's going to be buying this power? Is it going to be a transaction directly between the community solar developer and the city, or is it going to be between the developer and the customers? And what happens if the customers don't pay?
Yeah.
That's an unknown. So we're not going, we weren't given guidance to restrict it to one business model or the
Yeah.
other. We said, let the market come back and tell us, what are they proposing for the city of Newport Beach that complies with the laws of state Florida? What are they proposing to do?
And that's exactly the point is that I think the intent of doing a RFP is take advantage of the knowledge and experience that's out there in the commercial world that has thought about this and done it in different communities and say, hey, you have these assets already. We could help you with billing with that. We might construct some assets that would add into that pool and add some additional. Let's open it wider rather than narrow. We always have the option with an RFP that we look at it and say, no, this isn't what we want.
That I think, make sure I understand. Are you suggesting that we turn over to a solar bidder billing process for the cities?
We specifically discussed this when this resolution was brought forward, that was in, I believe it was presented both by the nonprofit whose name I don't remember, Vote Solar or something like that, and the commercial folks talked specifically about part of what community solar programs do is provide that billing. And it was also specifically talked about that they would not be the ones selling because of the nature of our utility. We do not want to do that. That was, we talked about.
I think we're taking some issues out of context of people who are not in the Florida market. Let me understand that correctly. It's not unusual for a seller of electricity to bill customers directly or to bill them through the utility. I would strongly suggest that City of Lake Worth Beach not turn over its billing system for monthly billing to an outside entity who's also selling to solar. I think that we should own our own billing engine and bill customers accordingly for the product that they buy from the city. The city would have its own billing system.
That makes sense to me.
I concur on that thought.
So we just look for direction in that. We don't know exactly what model folks will propose for us, right? So our thought was, let's put this RFP out there and let the market come back with what the market is willing to do for Lake Worth Beach.
Which is what we said about the pool.
We control our own destiny by owning our own billing model and doing our billing.
And we're still talking
Using
about.
a utility billing services company to do that.
Yeah, we're still on unfinished B.
The solar,
Yeah, a piece
I
of
feel like
community
we're just-
solar is how do you provide customers a range of options? And my understanding, both from reading in general and from the specific presentations that we all heard, one of the aspects would be a company might say, hey, we can help you with that specific billing aspect that's focused on the solar to give people options for that.
okay, I see this.
And we
Madam-
talked about that is that, well, that, and I think. what-
Madam Mayor, I just-
Can I finish?
No,
my
because
comment
if something's
without
more than 20
interruption,
minutes, aren't we supposed to go to a workshop?
We're
And
going,
we're way past 20 minutes on this, so maybe we need to workshop this.
please? I don't believe we're 20 minutes on this one,
Ms. Shayla can probably tell us when we started B conversation.
on the community solar.
Yeah. Yeah, because
It has been over 20 minutes.
we're supposed to go to workshop, right? I mean, it sounds like we're not getting anywhere.
Or a motion to extend.
Could be the motion to extend. I just think.
Or
that-
motion to
that,
table.
That the whole intent of doing it with an RFP is let's hear from the wisdom that's out there in other communities and other businesses that have done it.
Well, even if, all right, so even if a company came back and said, we want to, you know, I see it, right?
Sometimes you say that, I'm
No,
not
no,
trying to be
no.
aggressive.
You aggressive, no. If a company came back from an RFP and said, you know, this is our proposal and this is part of the billing, we could reject the billing part.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not in favor of giving our billing.
Neither am I.
Okay, so Commissioner Lee, you had you say you're off, okay.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna, we need to either move this to workshop or,
So either make a motion or do a workshop.
I
Hearing
feel
no,
like I feel like we're so close to just wrapping this up.
well, then do a motion to extend it.
Motion to extend.
Okay,
for how long?
we have to be.
A half an hour.
Yeah, because I don't want to sit here for another
I understand.
45 minutes and we're not getting
So
anywhere.
let's extend it for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. All right, just let's wrap this up because we have a whole new topic to start very
Right.
soon.
Yeah, so I am really looking forward to some education because when we talk about this billing model, my brain can't visualize any of it. So I'm really interested in it. So if having it be part of this RFP, so it can come back to us what the industry thinks it looks like, and maybe they don't choose to incorporate it at all. Or if Mr. Liberty has a better suggestion for how we can start to like grasp this idea of, you know, how customers get to choose their energy source and then what happens to customers that don't. Well, I mean, there's a million questions that I think it's worthy of getting the information and discussing.
And coming back to the discussion, or do you think that for
I
this?
don't care how we do it, if
Okay.
it's through the RFP or some other source, whatever makes the most sense. If the people are already thinking about providing one piece of that and they want to give their opinion about how that might fit into a billing situation, or if they don't want to give their opinion.
So let me add some comments, which I think may help.
Okay, we didn't have a second for the extension.
Did you second it? Extension?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's move quickly then.
Okay.
So on the billing concern, what I would suggest is that we not have a provider, a solar provider, take over our electric, water, and sewer utility billing or even electric utility billing. However, if they were to enroll, let's say 1,000 customers or 5 customers, are they proposing to bill those customers that enrolled directly for the energy that they sold? That's different. We would have to make sure that if
We
they-
still have a bill,
we still have to make sure that we get paid for
right?
the capacity, the transmission, the spinning
Right.
reserve, right,
Right.
the infrastructure cost. So I'm not sure how that would work. I'm pretty sure how it works in other parts of the country. I'm not sure if that's possible under Florida law to do here, but I'd be interested in seeing what are proponents suggesting that they can do in the state of Florida.
Okay,
It doesn't hurt to hear what they have to say.
sure. Commissioner,
And-
Vice Mayor
And
Robinson.
council can take a look at it, but I would not say that we would say because, company A won the contract to build a new solar project, that they're now taking over electric, water, and sewer
No,
utility.
that would be,
I
Oh,
never
no,
proposed it.
no.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure.
No, it
Okay.
wasn't
Commissioner
proposed.
McCoy's
Vice Mayor Robinson.
I appreciate the opportunity to learn from the marketplace. And I hope that in the future, when we consider other expenditures, that we open up to RFPs as we are doing tonight with this.
Okay, great.
I second that, Commissioner.
Okay, so where are we at? Do I need a motion? Are we?
No, it's a discussion.
It's a
so-
discussion. So what's the next step, Madam City Attorney?
We have a consensus.
Based on the discussion tonight, it appears there's 3 main changes. The one dealing with not requiring battery storage. 2, clarifying that this includes the landfill as long as they're sensitive to the cap, that issue.
Right.
And then the third one is to include something for a billing option to be offered by the vendor to supplement the city's existing billing system.
That we don't have to accept.
That we don't, right.
And of course, that any building would be strictly limited to electric. Would have nothing to do with
That sounds
water
like
and,
issue.
sewer, and it wouldn't replace those bills. It also obviously has to meet the Florida law requirements, which are different from
Right.
other
Frankly,
states.
I don't see how transferring the billing responsibility would add a lot of value. I think it actually complicates things for us because we
It really
have a
does.
whole series of bills that would have to be different than all the others because they would be getting yet another bill from somebody else. Right?
So now our customers would be more subsidizing because there'd be extra work. It would cost more for the city to do it. and we're not gonna raise the minimum, we're not gonna charge people, so it sounds like we would have a net loss on that.
I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody in the city would approve an RFP that was a net loss. I think we would look at that and say, well, that's a nice proposal. Thank you for your work, but no. So I don't think we need to worry quite that direction. I would hope that one of the approaches, and maybe it should be an RFI rather than an RFP, I don't know. But when we talked about it before, I think we envisioned that anybody who was going to propose something would enter into some sort of communications with Director Liberty's department and say, hey, this is something we could do. Would that work? And especially with the complications of Florida law, I would think that there would need to be some back and forth in that process. How you build that in there, should that be an RFI rather than RFP? I'll defer to people who are more knowledgeable in that department.
We're also planning on rolling out a new billing system for the city. Because the
Right.
billing system
We
that
just
we
went
have
through that.
today really doesn't lend itself to where we need to go in the future. So we don't have the option to give customers option A or option B on fuel supply. The budget billing function that we currently have in our system today doesn't work very well, and it's too clunky. And frankly, more customers need to avail themselves of a modern day budget process, which we can't do right now. And down the road, we may have other offerings we may use to, for example, to sell just maybe some education management service that's trim around people's service lines going on homes. We may be selling carbon monoxide detectors or any number of surge protectors and things like that we want to be able to bill for and build that we cannot do today.
Okay.
We can do billings.
Right, so, thank you. That's it, we're done.
Moving on.
All right.
Let's
No,
go.
we don't even need
Okay,
to
good.
vote, we're just, it's consent. I need to take a 5-minute break because we have a big item coming up. One of
Yeah.
important interest to,
Commissioner Stokes said that.
Commissioner,
I'm
what?
gonna try to get back in 10 minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then you'll run, and then you'll come back, and we'll be back.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna take like a 5 or 7-minute break. We'll be right back.
Unmute.
Right.
Good. Good to see. We're very much looking forward to this. Okay, are we back?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. We're back on the record at 7:40. The official number. Okay, so,
7:43.
thank you. Now we are on what I think is hopefully going to be the highlight of the evening.
Highlight,
The highlight of the evening, which is talking about our new business
you get popcorn?
utility drinks, utility customer service, which everyone in the city has an interest in because we all use the customer service folks. And Mr. Liberty, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And sitting to my right, your left is our customer service manager, Annette McTeague, who joined us a few months ago.
Welcome.
So running our customer service function.
Welcome to Lake Worth.
Franco is still here. Franco is working for us part-time and is providing a valuable service, and he will likely join us a little bit later tonight to provide a little bit more insight on some of the things that he's working on.
How much later?
By 8 o'clock, I think will be.
Yeah, right.
Just curious.
Yeah. So a number of months ago and weeks ago, we had a lot of inquiries and a lot of concerns. Just what is customer service? Not concerns with customer service, but how does it work? Where are they? What do they report to? And what's it all about? So Nanette is going to walk the group through that and the public, and then we're going to morph into a discussion about technology, bringing technology into the customer experience. A number of technology projects that are already underway. What most people experience with customer service is a long wait time on the phone, or have to come down and visit with us, or try to do things by email, which we prefer to do by email. But just what is happening behind the scenes, and what are some of the challenges that we face? Now, here's talk about answering phones and getting 6,000 to 9,000 phone calls a month. How do we do that with the staff that we have and with the outside resources? So I'll turn it over to Nanette, who has actually quite a history and background in running call centers around the country for a small company by the name of AT&T, and which she retired from, is now with us. I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody, and I'm glad to be here. So what I want to go over tonight is just to go over the customer service organization, what we do, how we're set up, and some of the challenges that we are facing. So in your deck, you'll see that we service roughly 28,000 customers in electric accounts, and we have about 14,000 water accounts. That's on a monthly basis. We answer incoming calls, and it averages about 57 calls a day. I'm going to go more into detail. You might think, well, those calls were awfully low, but I'm going to explain why. So we answer and reply to all incoming emails, and that includes setting up new service. We process utility payments and deposits, and we set up and terminate accounts. We handle all customer complaints, and we explain billing charges to customers, and we go over daily revenue reports as well as reconciliation. So on the next slide, this is the organization. As you can see, we're quite lean. We have a total of 11 people. We have 3 supervisors, 2 managers, 3 billing specialists, 2 customer service reps, and 1 utility person. And that's our makeup. So keep in mind, a total of 11.
And I see Don in the audience, who's one of our longest
Yeah.
standing
Oh,
customer service people. I have to recognize her.
she is like my right hand.
I'm sure.
Organization, and has been so patient getting me up to speed and teaching me everything I need to know. So,
It's a good one.
Donna, you need to-
I'm
Okay.
sorry, could you please speak in the mic so
Yeah.
Chris heard over the YouTube?
That's being recorded.
And then I'll add to that, the entire organization is based at the Annex building downtown.
Right.
That's where it all,
Which is open.
correct.
It is
It's
open.
open to the public.
And has been since mid-December.
Yep.
Yes.
You just have to speak really into it.
Okay, so how do the calls come into our center over the end? We have what's called an IVR, and that's the interactive voice response unit that comes in. And what that does is it's a system that lets customers call in and you can hear an automated voice to address any of their questions or concerns. Or if they can't address their questions or concerns, the call is then routed to whatever entity you have question or concern about. So they have 7 options in our IVR. One is power outage, sewer, or water. They can make payments, they can disconnect, or for non-payment, they have to pay their bills. Any billing questions and any new service changes, and then any other entities. And the other entities would be, are they calling about the city manager? Do they need that number? Do they need gas, whatever entity that we have, building codes, and so forth.
Okay, so I just want to, I'm going to go as we follow, just to make sure that, because we're talking to a lot of people out there too.
Okay.
So if I call the number, there's a, a recorded thing, and I have 7, and those are the 7 options that I have. Okay.
Right. Now, if you'll notice on this page, there is, and in 3 languages,
Right.
English, Spanish, and Creole.
But at this point, I'm not talking to a person, I'm choosing an option.
Correct.
Okay,
You're seeing what option fits your needs best, and then you will hit that option.
okay.
So as I said, we've got 2, we have 2 IVRs. We have one that goes to ENCO, which is a third-party company that handles all of our calls right now. We just instituted second IVR in December, and that's the AT&T IVR. Right now, the initial call will come in to the AT&T IVR and then directed accordingly. Okay. Now the AT&T, the goal behind that is right now, like I said earlier, all of the calls are being handled by ENCO. Our goal is to reduce those calls going to ENCO and have them handle like an overflow or nights and weekends type call. And then we being at the annex, would handle all other calls. Okay.
So we'll be the first line. If we have overage, then we need to go to ENCO.
Yeah, but that is down the road.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Is that the 561 number that people call, or is it the 1877 number
1561.
goes
The
to?
533-7300 goes into the IVR, and then based on your selection, it'll route the call appropriately.
Okay, and what about the 877 or whatever the number's on the bill? There's a 1-800 number, 877 number.
That is probably for the 877 number, that is for knowledge. And also there's a couple different numbers that I'll get into.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question about the other options. So I've had people that, had a lot of questions with the change in the way that we're, with the credit card fee.
Mhm.
And the reason why I asked for this presentation was because I heard a lot of feedback that they just had such a hard time getting in touch with a person, because obviously it was like a one-off different thing that doesn't follow any of these options. So
If you listen to the options when you call the 533-7300, and you listen, particularly you have to kind of be in tune to what is your question? Does it arrive around billing? And that's really a billing question. If you hit the other, that is not going to be it, because that'll direct to permits, building codes, other city telephone.
So if a person doesn't know exactly which category their question fits into, it seemed a little challenging for them to get to a person that could help direct them to the proper.
But other than those, what would they?
I had another person who, unfortunately, there was just a miscommunication. It was a billing question, so you would have fixed billing, but.
Probably was their billing.
Yeah.
And it has been challenging, believe me. I spend many hours calling that IVR and hitting various options. So we've made quite a bit of changes to make it easier. And some of the changes were because we instituted the AT&T IVR, some of it got kind of lost in a black hole, so to speak. Like I'm pushing, I want to talk about a deposit, and it just didn't go anywhere.
And
Some of those have been fixed.
okay, good. I had one resident say, Commissioner Stokes, you please try to use this system, because they pushed, they just couldn't. It was very frustrating.
Okay, well, okay, okay.
The intention was to, like virtually all utilities that I'm aware of, and any commercial businesses, any kind of business, you go into an IVR first.
Right.
There are many questions that can be handled by the machine without actually having to go to a rep. When you're taking in thousands of phone calls a month, and if we have an outage situation, it could be 1,000 phone calls in 15 minutes. You can't possibly have enough reps to get over that. So you want to be able to get people answers from the machine for the ones that can be answered. Therefore, narrow down the time spent on a phone when somebody really needs to talk to a rep. So you want to filter those out by giving them some form of service. If they finally need to talk to a rep, they get to a rep.
Of course, right. I just want to make sure they're getting to a rep.
Right, that's.
Yeah, they do have automated voices on almost every one of these options that'll say if the call pertains to an outage. There's no need to call us. Your problem will be fixed within 3 hours. If it's not fixed within 3 hours, here's the number to call, and it's the 533-1875 number. But it's in here. Or if you want to check the balance of your bill, you'll hear an automated voice. You press an option, it'll tell you what your balance is when it's due. So there's the whole tree would take from this whole room probably if you really want to.
It's when there's a problem that they have to talk to a person that, right,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, I will tell you on almost every one of the options, the customer service options, we've got 5 different options that you can select from. So if you don't hear your option or you think, okay, let me hit the billing option. I hit the billing and they didn't address my specific question, it'll say, please hold for a rep.
Okay.
So that has also been tweaked, if you will, because the long response time is contributing to it. And there's some other factors that mitigated that as well. For instance, now keep in mind, I just came here, I've been here for 2 months. But, so we have 2 people, and I'm kind of jumping out of order, but it maybe makes sense now. We have actually 2 people that answer calls. And these are staff calls that INCO could not resolve, and it's sent back to the local office.
Okay, good.
Okay, so with those people, 2 people in mind. We also, and in the voice response unit, I'm going to tell you, you can email your questions to us, or if you don't want to wait in line, because sometimes
Leave a number.
the wait time is considerably long. Now, one enhancement I'm trying to get through is when you do call, and there is a long wait time, and to me, a long wait time is anything over 5 minutes.
Oh, God bless your heart.
Really?
Industry standards for most companies are, their goal is to answer 80% of the calls within 5 minutes. Okay,
I love
we
that.
know that hasn't happened here, and some of the reasons for that is we, as well as INCO, got hit with COVID. They have 6 dedicated reps that handle our call. They also handle other businesses, so they are moving people around constantly as well. But they do answer our calls 7 days a week, 24 till 8 o'clock. So they got hit. They were down of the 6 people. They were down at times 3 people. So that's 50% of their force.
Yeah.
We were also down. We've had supervisors, Donna, myself, and anybody else doing like billing, they're taking calls as well. So it is a team effort. It's frustrating, believe me. I know for our customers, it's very frustrating for us as well. When people have to wait, and I see the reports when they've been waiting over an hour. I
No.
mean, that's unacceptable.
Right.
But we also have to stay within constraints of, I can only do so much with little people.
So if they leave their number, they get a call back.
They do,
Right.
and we generally call them back, INCO usually calls them back within 2 hours.
Okay.
Or we call them back as
Right.
soon as we get it. So it does move. It's just we have other work to do for our customers within Lakeport Beach. Since we've opened up our annex building, we just opened that up in December, the walk-in traffic, and I'm gonna go over that in a while too. But that's increased exponentially.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We knew it would.
Come on, I see your lines. Do you have a quick question? Because I kind of want to let them keep going. Just a quick question.
It's just, I love the idea of the call back, leave a number and we'll call you back. And I think everybody is very happy to recognize that, hey, the call back may not be instant. If you're busy, it may take a while. People don't care about that. But people get very frustrated calling and press 1 for this option, our options have changed, all that stuff. I would ask, particularly since we're a small utility, and many of the things that people want to deal with often have geographic specificity to it. Hey, there's something happening behind my yard. And somebody who answers the phone who actually knows Lake Worth, knows the area, and says, oh, what you need is this. I think there's enormous value to the utility and to our city to get a real person first. And even if it means that you don't get one right away,
Not a
that you
question.
get a call back. I just,
Let's let them keep, I understand your, let's
and I
let
hear,
them
I get a lot of questions, I got a lot of frustrations of, look, I was trying to do something civil, and I couldn't get a real person. I'm
and I
getting
think that's what
free-
they're trying to fix. Let's keep this to questions and let them keep going. It's 8 o'clock already.
So keep in mind some of the questions, particularly on outages.
Well, outages we shouldn't be doing outages that way. We should be pushing that information out, so nobody should ever call for outages. We're
Right.
getting to that.
What our customers do. They call us, even though it says it on our landing page, it says it when you do call in to us, we know about your service, it will be fixed within 3 hours, and the voice tells them, you don't need to call us. If it's not fixed within 3 hours, the resolution is already there, then you can call this number and a person will answer.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. Okay, so there's the 7 different options that they have. I'm gonna go over kind of quickly the system operations call. Those are 1 and 2, power outage, which we've already kind of discussed, and the sewer backup water emergency. So on the power outage, again, no need to call. If your service is not back on in 3 hours, you can call the 1695, and you can also report it online. The sewer is transferred right away to the 1695 number.
So that's option 2. If you have a sewer problem, hit 2, and then they get connected to somebody that
Yes.
can talk to them.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it on the system operation side. On the customer service side, we've got many different options, again, in 3 languages. So the first one is option 3, make a payment. And on the make a payment option, there is an automated message. And since we did open up the annex, we do take applications for new service. But within those applications, we have to make sure that the customer fills out all the paperwork correctly. And 9 times out of 10, we have to make numerous calls. Either we don't have a lease agreement, we don't have the correct address, the correct maintenance on it. So those are multiple calls that have to come through to us. So if they're going to pay a deposit, you're going to hear an automated voice that says, Mr. Customer, if you've already signed up for service, you would have received an email. And within the body of that email, you can click on a link and it'll tell you how to pay your deposit when it's requested. If you did not get an email, then what you're going to do is you're going to press, I think it's 1. Yeah, press 1 and the call is then sent to Encode. Do you have any questions on that?
I'm sure there's going to be a comment that not everybody has email. I anticipate that comment. I just want to put that out there that if you don't have an email, I mean, most everyone does at this
Right.
point, but some people don't. So,
We did it that way for a year,
and it's worked.
I haven't
Okay, all
heard
right,
any-
fine. I just wanted to bring it up.
and then we reopened the doors to have them come back first,
Exactly.
Yeah.
which
Okay,
actually exacerbated a problem because when we were doing, now they're taking some time off from work. Or their life.
Right.
Some of the annex, only to find out that they don't have all the documents they need, and they have to leave and then come back again.
Right. Is there a, li-
By email or phone, that could have all been done,
Yeah.
to come to their home 7 days a week.
okay, thank you.
Okay, on the billing questions, they have various options. Again, that's option number 5. If you have any questions on your bill, again, there's an automated voice that'll tell you, okay, your account number can be found at the top right-hand corner of your bill. Your account number is right there.
Can it be done by address as well, or just account number?
I'm sorry,
Can it be done by address, searched by address as well as account number?
not the system.
Okay,
This is informational, so it's just telling your customer that's calling, if you want to know what your account number is, it is X,
okay.
right? If you need a copy of your bill, you can press another option, a bill amount, you can opt where that is found, any auto pay, extensions to pay. Now, on the extensions to pay, Encode does handle our extensions, but they're allowed 3 business days to make those. Any other exceptions outside that period would come to us.
Okay.
And we would handle it, because we don't want them, making
Yeah.
some kind of wild.
We get 75 days.
Yeah,
Really?
we have a very, I will say, in looking at this, we have a very liberal policy on paying the bill. A lot. Bill deposits, I think that's it on new services, it's not, again, customers are coming in more so than not. We have a line now where we actually kind of put up the extensions, because people are waiting, they're either wanna get an application for new service, return an application, they want to pay their bill, we do not take cash,
Right.
but we will take their check. Or they want to pay a parking ticket, we will tell them they can leave off a check, and then someone from the parking division comes over and takes those checks up. Let's
Do you take money orders?
we do.
Okay.
So for these, if you don't mind for these options, so other press 7 and then other press 4, those will get you to a real person?
Yes,
Okay.
eventually.
Because of the
Wait,
call
there's
wait
a
time?
waiting.
Okay, not because you have a lot more hoops to jump through.
No, but there
She was so
was.
good until
We
that
was.
moment.
I mean, but we have been whittling down the time that it takes. And keep in mind too, like with COVID, they were down almost 50% of their force, that's where we. But they are getting better, because I've also restructured some of the IVRs and where these slots go to. And making sure, number one, the biggest problem was that it doesn't go to black hole.
Right.
Yes.
Because I would be just as, I'm a
Horrible.
consumer too, and I
Yeah.
would be livid if that happened. So those are being rectified. Okay, if their service is disconnected, for non-payment, again, there's an automated voice that says, if your service has been disconnected, in order to get it reconnected, it must be paid in full. And there's also tells them right on, up front, there's a $35 reconnection fee. If it's within the first 12 months, if it's multiple times, then it's gonna go up to 90. So at least I'm glad to see that there is a message that tells them, so there's no hidden fees that,
Yeah.
well, nobody told me that. So that's in our announcements as well. And then also it tells them, once you have paid your bill, make sure that you turn off all the breakers.
Right.
And then call us back.
Okay.
Let's see, new service, we talked about that, other options, and the other options, we said earlier briefly was building department, code enforcement, trash, roads, parking services, city park, so on.
So when it says gas, you connect them to the FPUC people or the public utility? So it says gas
It
present
is
too.
gas,
Yeah.
gas people.
I believe we do have, Enco also is the call center provider for the local gas company,
Okay,
as well as other electric companies in the state.
okay.
I have a question. Do you monitor, you have numbers around what types of calls you get the most frequently?
Billing,
And
not 90%, not now, I should say, about 80%.
which one is?
Dylan.
Billing?
Question.
So my question for the others, do we get a lot of people calling our electric utility when they really need other departments? Yeah,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
We have, I mean, you have to understand with an IVR, and I've been very guilty of this myself. I keep pushing buttons, you know, because I think there's a secret,
Right.
Code.
Zero.
There's a secret code.
well, or there's a secret path to actually get to a live operator.
Right.
Most people call, at 9, or they know 0 doesn't work, or it's 3, so they'll just keep pushing hopes that they do get a live
Somebody.
person.
For the other option, is the messaging clear that it's not like another electric question? Is it clear when they say press 7 if you have, I don't know, is it, I'm just wondering if it
If
matches
none of
the
the
customer's
above, press other,
expectations.
right? If-
Yeah, but there is also, if it says other, you will be able, some of it does go back into it with respect to, do I want to, try to think offhand, pay a deposit? I mean, some of those questions are reiterated again. Just so the consumer, maybe they didn't hit the correct button and didn't have an opportunity to, the question's not about
Okay.
billing, it's about, I want to transfer my service.
Couple of points to put out there for the public. This IVR, what we refer to as AT&T IVR, the first IVR that you get into. We went live with that in December,
Uh-huh.
so it's
Mr.
still.
Liberty, use the mic, just so we can hear you.
So we went live with that in December, so this is still a work in progress, and it's getting better, and the next background in call center operations and with AT&T is allowing her to continually improve it. And it'll continue to improve. I don't think we'll be sitting here 5 years from now saying, yeah, we're all done. No, it'll continue to evolve and improve as we go. The other thing to keep in perspective is the cost of this. So for example, a customer service type call
That's not an outage call. A customer service call that Enco handles for us, $5.30.
$5.35.
$5.35 per call.
Mm.
And the outage call was $2.65. They're a variable resource. They get paid by the call that they handle. So what we'd like to do is have as many calls as possible that don't need a live rep to be handled through the phone system, right, through the ID.
It's a cost saving.
Is a cost saving. And it also, imagine now that there's literally hundreds, and it's an outage, it could be 1,000 people waiting in queue to talk to somebody. And we all want to talk to somebody.
Right.
Well, one of the things that's lacking in this organization, what's the service level standard if you want this organization to perform to? How many calls do you want to answer? What percentage of calls do you want to answer within X number of minutes? We can then build an organization that will attempt to address that. But if you say, I got a complaint, fix it. Well, I can solve this problem. We'll go hire
Throw me some money.
X number of people.
Right. Well, that's
And
the
how do you
thing.
like
And
that solution? Oh, no, we don't like it.
right.
What we're trying to do is to get to what's the service level that you want so that you staff accordingly.
For a cost that we can afford.
Correct.
I think that's the second, we can hire 100 people and everybody gets answered on the first ring,
Yeah,
but
and that's just not cost
Right.
effective. I do have to check one thing, the cost is $5.60, not $5.35.
Okay.
thank you.
So when we get into the discussion, and we all appreciate small town feel, but imagine for the moment, the real situation. We can't fit all those people in that building.
Right.
To give that small town experience to everybody. And when the big one comes, the storm comes, we've told the employees, go home and be safe. We'll call you when you can come back. That call center is now shut down. Right? So it behooves us to have a second call center up and running to take those phone calls. Because here we are in the potential impact zone. Our employees are not in that building. The building is not rated for hurricane.
No.
And there's no emergency generator in there. There's no backup for the phone system.
Other than that, it's
Other
perfect.
than that, it's perfect, right? So we need to have this resource that is someplace else
Bless
in the country that is not in the impact zone of the storm, that knows our systems, that is in Naviline, is in Paymentus,
Right.
is in Tantalus, the EMI system,
Okay.
handling inquiries from customers. Now, we recognize that if you're in California, you really don't know what Lake and Lucerne look like, right? You don't know what South Bay is, you don't know what block, you don't know the
Bless you.
street, may not know the names of the people. But
Right.
the fact is that you need people to answer these phone calls, and concentrating them all in one place is really not practical when you think to that big scenario. Now what happens? Where are the people answer those phone calls? Well, they're home behind their storm shutters, weathering the storm until we tell them it's safe to come back.
I think, I do think.
And the other thing I'm add, is
I
that,
don't think any of us are saying that we don't want the call
No,
center.
I think we do want, I think, for me, let's skim as much off the top as we can, but let's make sure that what is left over is easy for those people to get the answers that they need resolved, and that they're not going into a black hole, and they're not like getting frustrated or waiting 2 or 3 or 4 for a response like that. I'm more interested in making sure that this is easy to manage, very clear, the expectations of I'm gonna push this button, match what that action that button does.
Yeah.
And that if none of these are the right button for you, that you can get to a person relatively painlessly.
All of them do eventually.
and we're also providing a service level. We talk about taking phone calls now 7 days a week, 12 hours a day.
It's
Right.
not possible.
Which we were not doing when you had to come to the office and do business between 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock, 5 days a week, right? So now we're providing the 7-day-a-week ability of customers to do things remotely by phone or talk to a rep, leave a message, email the things back and forth. If they want to email it to us at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're going to get it the next morning. We're going to start working on it. They didn't have to come into the office. We're having the IDR. We're pushing a lot of stuff out there to improve that. It's not perfect yet, but we're doing things that were not there 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So we're not there 5
Or
years ago.
3 months ago, it sounds like.
Exactly.
And quite honestly, I mean, in answer to your earlier question about it's nice to have, people answer all our calls. It's not cost effective, number one, to have a rep answer every single call. It would be fine, in my estimation, I mean, I've been in this business 35 years. It would be, if you have a direct talk, yeah, you want to talk to a person right off the bat. But there are literally hundreds of things that an IVR can answer with AI, within artificial intelligence, such as my balance, how much, where do I pay my bill? How do I get new service? All of those are automated voice responses. And most of the people understand that that's what they're gonna get.
Mhm.
They do, I'll be the first to admit, people like to talk to a rep, but it's not always necessary either. And it's expensive. I mean, one of the first things I told Ed is, I'll get you whatever service level you want.
Yeah.
You tell me whatever level you want, I do it for you. But I gotta hire people to do that, and that's just not cost effective.
Okay, Commissioner Boyd, quick comment?
And I hear you, but I think we ought to not mix different things. Dealing with the hurricane situation or the power outages shouldn't drive what we do with the rest of the system.
I don't think.
Because those are exceptional things and you deal with that a different way.
Sure.
The power outages, we should be moving as fast as possible, that we push that information out. So as soon as there's an outage, we know that. We have the technology to know where this stuff is. We send it out to people so they know already that we know that there's an outage at their house. That's doable, and we should do that so that there's no point in people calling. I
Maybe
agree.
we have their cell phone numbers and we can text.
And
them.
that's something that is pretty easy that we could get people to do it if we offer them something for that information, like, hey, you're gonna get real-time leak detection, you're gonna get real-time outage
Yeah,
information.
and I think.
Would you give us your cell phone number? And I think 90% of the people will. So deal with the outages as a separate thing. Don't have people calling in because it's just frustrating for everybody. It doesn't help the utility, it doesn't help the people, and there's better ways to do that. I think, yes, cost effective is an issue, and obviously we can't hire 100 people, but if you could have somebody answering a lot of the stuff, that you get to a person first, and then the things like checking a balance. I agree, that doesn't make any sense to have somebody call in, I want to know what my balance is. You can do that online. You can do that with a website. Doing things with emails. Hey, I need to send you something, or let people send paperwork by email. Great idea. And not everybody has it, but a lot of people will. But I think, especially in our town, especially with the reputation that Lake Worth Electric Utility has, it's so negative. We should get you to a person as fast as possible. I think we earn a lot of goodwill out of that is hard to put a value on. Sure, steer some things away. Look, if somebody calls, hey, you gotta go to the website to get
But
that.
Chris, are we gonna have somebody who speaks Creole, Spanish, and English? Out of the 6 people, are they all gonna be trilingual? I mean, we're trying to service the entire community.
But keep in mind that when someone's service is out, when they hit that button, there's an automated voice that tells them, there's no need to call. We already know that there's a power.
And I can tell you that 90% of those people, their blood pressure just went up when they get that.
By
I don't think
hearing
so.
that there's services out,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
within 3 hours, we
No.
give it. And then we also go further, saying if it's not restored within 3 hours, call this number and you will go through right away.
It'd be nice. So a lady says, hi, it's gonna be 3 hours. You don't need to call us, or a voice machine
Right.
says it. I mean, that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I've called when downtown has been out, because
Yeah.
my staff calls me and goes, we just lost power, what do we do? And I call and I'm like, it'll be restored, you know?
In 3 hours, and if it's not here, here's a specific number, not the main number, but a specific number to call for those outages. And also, you can go online, you can. submit-
Outages, in my opinion, shouldn't be dealt with calls.
But that's just a human. I mean, people are gonna call,
We
people
haven't
just
found a way
call.
to convince the customer not to call.
Yeah, really. It's hard not to. It's hard not to
They
when
don't
it
call us,
goes
they
out. you're
call
like,
one of you, and then you call us and say,
Right.
such and such is out of power, what are you doing about it? So,
Right.
but, correct. What you're gonna hear later on is another presentation that will follow us, talk about the outbound.
Today?
PR. Yes. You wanted to know about customer
Coffee
service.
will be served.
Right?
Thank you, Commissioner.
It's really important.
Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Keep in mind, too, the number of calls that we get on a monthly basis, is almost 10,000 calls.
Mhm.
I have 2 people that can answer the call locally here, and I have 6 in Enco that can answer it.
That's 8 people to answer 10,000 calls.
And we're out of parking spaces, by the way, if we had more.
So something I just want to mention,
Just a topic.
I'm happy that this is very informative and thank you guys so much for doing this. And it sounds like we might want to roll some of this into a budget conversation because as policymakers, we need to know, like, what is the trade-offs? If you want to narrow the wait time from 2 hours to 5 minutes, then you need to give me another person, and that's gonna affect the rates in this way, but we need that information so that we can help
Right,
make the decisions about those trade-offs.
absolutely.
It's 10,000 a month,
10,000 calls
a month.
a month. So yes, and I'm glad you brought that question up.
And on those 10,000, do you have the data on what the topics are?
Well, she said 80% is billing.
Yeah,
About 80%.
I mean-
There's various other things that want to branches off of that. But in order to be more sustainable and more customer friendly to our base, yeah, right now I've got I have 2 recs that we just filled. We will be hiring 2 more. I need 6 more people.
Yeah.
And I see that you're covering that soon in your slides.
All right, let's let them keep going.
okay, yeah.
Okay. So in addition to calls, we do other things. So the next slide, let's see, I think we've talked,
Yeah,
It's,
I think we've gone over
Yeah.
that.
It broke. It's frozen.
we broke the internet.
All right, well, I can go
Oh,
ahead.
here we go.
All
Why
right.
don't we do this?
So
one
keep in
too?
mind what's highlighted in yellow is we have 9,600 calls on average on a monthly basis.
Hmm.
So I'm just giving you the data that I had from the last 2 months. So if you can see in December, we answered 393 emails. Come January, it was a 50% increase month over month. That's huge. We had 307 new applications, and that was flat in January. 225 web inquiries. We had a 23% increase for 276 inquiries. We handled 1,360 calls in December, and it was reduced down to 910. Now, the reason why it was reduced is I turned on the AT&T IVR to see if we could handle it for 2 days, and it was crazy. So that's why it was so high, and I had to say, we just didn't have the force, the number of people to handle calls, and everybody was answering calls.
So that's the difference between the Lake Worth Beach and the Enco.
Yes. Now, this is all us. This is all Lake Worth. This is not Anchor. We had 344 people come in. And again, what they want to talk about is either parking tickets, they have billing questions, they have payments. And then, since we just opened up mid-December, the foot traffic increased 50% month over month. And already we're up to 700 in February. So we're not done. So people are very aware that we are now open and it's driving the traffic back in. When it does drive the traffic back in, what it does is it takes away from the very limited staff that I have. Now I have to put a person up front to handle it, and sometimes 2 people, so the line is not that long. That takes away from their duties and other things that they were handling, like new service, and that's one of our first priorities.
Right.
When they do have service, we want to make sure that we get them turned on as quickly as possible. And then we also handled, we handled 13% of the calls in December, and in January, we handled 10%. And then Enco handles the balances of it. So if you see the Lake Worth 2-month average, about 500 emails, 300 new apps, 250 web inquiries, about 1,100 inbound calls, foot traffic of about 430 people, and then the number of calls that we handled was 12%, and then Enco handled the other 47%. Now, keep in mind when customers are calling these numbers, and the reason why it's not adding up to 100.
I was gonna just say that. I'm not good at math, but I know that is not 100.
Yeah. What'll happen is they'll say, if you don't want to wait, leave your number and we'll call you back. But that's still a number called in, but they didn't handle the call at that specific time. Had to take a call back, or they were told to email.
So these are not counted. That's why they're not
Those are
counted.
not
Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
All right, so let's talk money, which was your question, right? So Enco in 2022, we budgeted $400,000. We actually spent $425,000,
Or 452.
or excuse me, 52. So we went over the budget by 50,000,
Hmm.
52,000. And they are averaging about $38,000 a month. So you can see there, the average call, the call cost is $5.60. So handling 9,600 calls, do the math on that, it's about $53,000 a month. If we added 6 people,
Mhm.
you'll see an increase. You'll see a decrease in ENCO's costs, which is my goal, is to save the city money and handle it in-house. And then use ENCO, like, we don't want to get rid of them. We want them to handle the overflow calls when it does get busy down the road, or nights and weekends, or a hurricane type calls. So if we did that, the loaded salary would be $436,000 for 10 reps.
At how much an hour?
We pay $15.38. It's on.
Start.
15.58?
58.
So that's not including if we wanted to pay more,
It's on the next slide.
to be more competitive. Okay.
Right. Yeah, you'll see on the next slide, we're the lowest. We pay $15.58, West Palm is $16.30, and Boynton is $17.18.
Does ENCO have a minimum call that they have to get for us to get that $5.60? Like if we only end up using them for 3,000 calls, would we still pay the same rate?
Correct.
Okay.
So if I had additional 6 reps, the ramp up time is usually anywhere from 4 to 6 months for them to ramp up and be fully knowledgeable of what we expect them to handle in each and every call. We can do that, it's gonna take time. Some of the challenges with that is,
Where?
Where are you gonna put them?
well, we renovate our building, which we're already going to be doing hopefully, but we have to reposition
Mhm.
things to do it. So it's very doable. It's just, are you okay with funds that it's gonna cost? To me, it would reduce the expenditures. Like I said, we're paying ENCO right now $450,000
Right.
on an annual basis. If we reduce that by even 30,000, which is in here, it's a savings.
And 6,
And I have control over
the people.
how the people
Right.
are answering phone calls. The quality, because right now, all I can do, and I do this on an hourly basis almost, is I listen to the calls
Hmm.
that I get from ENCO, but keep in mind, those calls, I can't pick the calls I want to listen to.
Right.
They send me.
Oh.
And it's job creation, which we're all in favor of. I mean, we're 100 I mean, we're,
Things to do with them, that's my question.
that's something that we're all in agreement on is
Customer service
In my
people do the ENCO
In my
function.
estimation, to hire an additional 6 to bring me up to 10, it's doable. Will I come back and say, oops, I need more people? I won't.
Would we then keep, but we would still keep ENCO there in case.
As overflow.
Yeah,
and-
for
Okay.
the overflow calls, when it gets busy during busy peak times as well as after hours.
Is there a base fee that we have to pay ENCO, or is it just how many calls we do? If there's no like $100 a month plus $5 per call, okay.
Now, the system operations calls, they are a little bit less, it's like $2 and
Okay,
$2.60.
but there's no underlying contract price that we have to maintain, just the call fee, okay.
But that's good, because
Yep.
I think where we're headed is the more that we can do locally,
Right.
and if there's no sort of base. for the
CM has
ENCO
something to say.
people,
But
it helps.
you gotta understand too, the space to
Right,
do
it's
it.
not so easy.
I need the infrastructure to do that. That means all the lines going
Lines.
in. I have to have the computer set up and I have to have them trained.
Sure.
Other than that,
The
it's
training
easy.
does take a while. Didn't we use?
Our
to
city
have-
manager has our city manager has something to add.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A quick question on the cost for the salaries. Does that include fringes as well?
Is it the what?
Fringes.
Yes, it's a loaded salary.
Okay, so, okay,
Yeah, then that's 42.
okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's loaded. Although they make 15.60, there's a loaded salary.
Okay, I missed the loaded. I'm sorry. Thank you.
And it is on there.
Yes, it's on the prior slide. Loaded.
So it sounds like a budget.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of the things that we need to deal with in the budget is this year is, how do we hand that? Not just salaries. How do we do we budget for the 6 people to come in? Do we budget for them to have the infrastructure? Do we budget for them to fix up the building so that they can handle the 6 more people?
And what's the overlapping? Because obviously while you're training 6 people, we're gonna have you paying ENCO to answer those calls while they're being trained. So there is gonna be an overlap.
And also the plan of relocation during the renovation.
Yeah, right.
And it depends on the renovation. I mean, I'm not gonna hire 10 people right off the bat. And
Right.
usually they're done in stages, and then we also have to have the space for them to sit at. So we can add space by space and we're doing the renovation in the building.
Okay.
I don't give up his office.
And
Yes, we can look forward to that.
and by the way, to Commissioner Malega's question, there are a lot of Haitians who are fluent in Spanish as well as Creole and English. So it's not unconceivable that you could find people who were trilingual in one person. Somebody who's native Spanish, not that many are going to speak Creole, but the other way does exist. And you could split it up some.
I agree with you.
I'm very much in favor, just in sort of to give you some policy direction, the more that people can get to a real person, the happier I am. The more that they're here so that we're creating work locally as well as the people have better chance of knowing the area locally, the better. I have no problem with the idea, and I think most customers don't, that, hey, you're in the queue. If you don't want to wait, leave your phone number and somebody will get back to you. And I don't think people keep track of how long it was they got back. They keep track of if you're sitting on the phone,
Right.
listening to elevator music,
Well-
that they do.
One of the other items that's not in place yet that I've asked for, that I've had in previous positions were, when I call a number, if I'm gonna wait, I want that recording to say, Mr. Customer, you are 10th in line. The
Exactly,
closing time will be
Yep.
5 minutes.
Mhm.
Right,
If
and
you
then give them
prefer-
the option.
And
Yeah.
then
Right,
it gives
right.
the option of
Call back.
either, well, we really don't want, I don't want to drive that behavior of them calling back. I want them to say, leave your number, you won't lose your place in line, and we will call you back.
Right.
No, that's what I mean,
Yeah, that's what she's, yeah.
I think she's,
Not like I'm calling you back, no.
yeah.
Oh, we're all on the same page. It's a.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
let's keep going. It's now 8:30.
I think that's it. You all have no questions for me?
No, and if we do, we'll email them.
Just
No, we're gonna press.
Hi.
just make Donna sit here.
Donna,
Hey, oh, okay. I thought there was a whole section of, here, okay.
I was gonna bring it.
I wish you would have.
I wish you would have.
Quick question, what is the average response time for an email? They usually email the next day, like if somebody emails into customer service, they usually get a return email.
Within that day or the next day.
Okay,
Do we send an email that says, thank you, we've received your email, we'll be back to you within 24 hours? Can we work on, maybe it's, that'd be
Yeah.
great. Letting at least know that it was been.
The
received,
confirmation.
you've got it.
And that can be automated.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's an
That's
automatic response.
Right.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you.
That's it.
You know,
Ideas, I'm out.
Electric utility customer services is like we've all experienced in many, many ways from ourselves and our constituents. It's really good to know that the kinds of questions that we're asking, you've already anticipated and are planning for the future. And we really appreciate that. Commissioner Malega.
I just have two more questions. On the application that you talked about that people carry into you, do we have a box on there that says preference selected for language that they're communicated in? Does it say English, Spanish, or Creole? I would like us to be very forward thinking on that. And a preference of contact. Do you prefer email or phone call or text message? Because if we're really trying to go towards that data driven,
Mhm.
when they're filling out that application, I think that's a captive time to say, okay, when it comes to outages, what is your preference? Do you want us to text you or do you want us to send you an email?
Well,
think
we don't
that's it.
notify them. We don't notify them of outages at this point.
But I'm saying if we're moving towards that,
Let's start collecting.
let's collect that information now on how they want their preference.
We were already planning to do that.
See,
Well, that's what I'm asking.
We're actually giving customers the option coming soon, choose the language they want their billing.
That's why I just asked it should be on the application, sir. If
It's
we're
a
getting,
beautiful thing.
if we're getting data, get as much data as we can.
That's certainly good because we pick up 100 to 200 customers a month.
Hmm.
We have to capture the other 27,000
Well,
a year. So
Slowly,
we're gonna get those too.
Just be
We're gonna-
proactive, that's all I'm
We're gonna reach out to
saying.
them and give them the option to tell us.
Commissioner McVoy is going to call them and ask them to send that to you
That's very-
Individually.
individually. Yeah.
Yes, that's very helpful.
Actually, if you give your address out, Mr. McVoy, I'm sure I'll just show
His
up. at
phone
your
number
house.
is. I'm sure a lot of people have our phone.
Trust me, they're already hitting them up.
I get plenty of calls.
I know we all do.
When we started down this path, I think 3 or 4 years ago, with Enco, we envisioned having these parallel paths where we could have a primary call center and a backup call center. So we've been moving down this path. It's just very difficult to get there and sustain it. Keep in mind too, that in the last 3 months, we've done a whole lot of stuff. We've had our staff tied up in developing what the new bill is gonna look like. We had the program, new rate changes. We had the reopen after COVID. We've had significant turnover. So we've and a new manager coming on board. So they're going on.
Easy peasy.
And we're providing services that years ago we didn't provide. Now we're providing them. And also during COVID, we did all of this without having people in the office.
Exactly.
So customers were getting all of the services that they needed to get without actually having to come to the office. Now that we're open, some are likely to come to the office, and we think more will continue like that. So we have to accommodate that. That means more traffic downtown, more need for parking spaces. People looking for where they're gonna park their car because they're gonna come into the office, they're gonna wait there in line.
Yep.
There's gonna be some frustration with that too, which we recognize.
That's what life's all about. They just pick your frustrations.
But they can do online and by email,
Mhm.
all the things that they can do when they walk in person. They don't have to be there in person.
Okay. Well, it's nice that we have the option. We're getting more towards the personal touch. That's what we've all been talking about.
Love it, love it, love it.
Do I have a motion
Motion?
to adjourn?
Are you finished?
No, please.
They're not
I'm
done.
not done yet.
He wasn't joking, he's not done.
No.
I thought you weren't.
No.
See, I'm thinking Tom is gonna be.
I think you said we did the incoming, now we're doing the
All right.
outgoing.
Okay.
Here's the thing.
Cliff Notes version?
Okay, here's the next thing that we are currently working on. All of this,
Thank you
Cliff
very
Notes
much.
version?
we talked about how we handle all the calls that come in. Right? What we're trying to do is do a better job up front, so the calls don't come in at all.
Mhm.
Right? So that gets to the technology component. So already underway, things that have already been approved or in the works is this software or off the platform package of technology that we're rolling out. So OMS, outage management system, I'll explain what all these are: engineering analysis, GIS, and the IVR, which is a little bit different than the IVR we just talked about because it's an outbound one. And in the future, we set the stage for the next billing system that we need to have. The 4 pieces up top are already underway. We're expecting to roll out the vast majority of them in summer. So let's talk about what they are. This presentation is borrowed heavily from the presentation by the people who we bought the package from. So we look at engineering analysis. What is engineering analysis? Engineering analysis is a detailed model of how our electric system behaves and operates. We need to have that because we need to understand where our protections are going to be, how power actually flows, where we can connect customers to keep circuits balanced, A, B, and C phase, where to properly attach loads, and how the system actually behaves under load and during transients. The outage management system. The outage management system leans very, very heavily on the geographic information system, which is off to the right. So let's talk about GIS. The city has a GIS system, but what it does not have is one that's very, very detailed and specific to electric infrastructure. So when you and I look up at a pole, we see wires and transformers. It's important for us to know who exactly is served off of that wire, off of that transformer, off of that lateral, off of that fuse, off of that switch. What the GIS system does is it gives us that information. The outage management system pulls in information from the AMI system and from our field-based equipment that's tied to SCADA. And it looks at GIS and it can very quickly look at a large outage and say, hey, through machine learning, AI, and say, this is probably the point where this all began. Go to this spot and you will probably find the problem. That's good to have on a daily basis, but frankly, our operators are quite good because they have a lot of experience. They probably know very quickly where the problem is. Where it's particularly helpful is when you get into a large storm or a large outage event, because it helps you quickly figure out how do I get the most number of customers back in the quickest manner possible. So when you link GIS, engineering analysis, and OMS all together, you now have a very powerful tool to really shorten your response time. The next piece of that is the IVR. If you know who's connected behind that transformer, behind that fuse, behind that switch, behind that circuit, that breaker, you can now send outbound messaging to them that says, we know you have an outage.
Right.
This is how long we estimate you'll be out. It can be an outbound phone call. It can be an outbound email. It can be an outbound text message. Those are all the things that we're looking to roll out. This is already underway. These projects are already in development. And we're hoping to demo it this summer. We've asked more than demo. We've asked the vendor to be ready to go, ideally by June 1, so we have it up and running in time for the hurricane season. We want to be ready to go. So I wouldn't want the public to think that we're just static, we're not doing anything, but this is a very important part of it, very powerful piece that we haven't had, and it's already approved, money's in the budget, and the work is currently underway.
I love to hear that. Money's in the budget.
It's budgeted, the contracts have been issued, the contractors have been working, that staff are working on it. And we expect to be, I think we're about 75 to 80% complete, this number that I've been given. And then we expect to start rolling it out in June. What follows that down the road? Utility billing or customer information. That particular piece we have not contracted for yet, but we will be going out for that shortly. What that's going to allow us to do is not only fix bills in terms of making the bills work properly. Net metering, for example, the current billing system doesn't do net metering. We do that manually with spreadsheets and then have it inserted into a bill. Budget billing.
That is not cost effective.
Not cost effective at all. And when we know we're going to have more net metered customers, it's not going away, right? It's going to grow. That's not why we needed a billing system. That's one of the things that we need to be able to do. We talked about being able to select which fuel clause you want to be attached to.
Right.
We've also said we want to roll out new products and services down the road. We need a billing system that does that. But we also need to be able to be more responsive to the customers. For example, budget billing. We currently have budget billing. We don't advertise it because it works terribly. It's important, I think, for customers to be able to select the budget option and at the end of the year, have it automatically recalculate, not send you a big bill and you're underpaid. Let's say you're underpaid by $500. You've been on your budget, but at the end of the year, you use more than the budget. Let's say you're underpaid by $500. We can just a round number. Right now, the system sends you a bill for $500 supplement. What it should do is take that $500 and roll it into your next year's budget.
Just like your mortgage does on your escrow.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Or if you're due a credit, give you that credit as a credit on your bill, right?
Over the next 12 months.
Over the next 12 months, we're going to adjust your budget. So it'll
Right.
work us up and down, but it'll stay as a true budget. Right now, the billing system that we have, no fault of anybody here, it is not just
Yeah.
the old system. It doesn't do that.
It's
The new
antiquated.
system will.
Are you sure? Mine adjusted down, like, I know you told me I'm like one of the very few people in this city that are actually enrolled in budget billing. And I had, I think, a very high year one year, and then the next year it adjusted and I paid less every month.
I'm looking for a lifeline because I was told it wouldn't do that.
Franco.
Franco's your time.
Franco did it by hand in the
I think I had
back
to
room.
pay, like, I think I had to pay the difference or I got a rebate back, but my future bills do budget down. It just doesn't incorporate the differences.
Yeah, every October, you have that true up period. Either you're gonna pay a little bit more or you get a credit, and then you'll get a new 12-month plan. But that's being done by Rose. I gotta give her all the credit. Rose works there, she does all of that.
Wow.
So it's a very manual process.
It certainly seems, I forget when we stopped using computers with a crank on the side, but it's been a while. We ought to be able to automate that.
So we recognize right up front, again, we borrow these slides from Millsoft, which is the company we contracted to do a bunch of this work. Where do you want more? You want more value, you want to be more responsive, right? Just go right down the list and you look at what are things you want less of, look right, less aggravation, right? Less rigidity, less bureaucracy, less excuses. These are all things that we're trying to build into these systems to bring them to our customers. So the overriding message to the customers out there is we know that these things are needed and we're already underway with it. And we thank you for your patience in getting us there. And employees want to do more with the time as well. They don't enjoy the Facebook posts, the derogatory comments, the public opinions like that. Our employees are doing a heck of a lot. I also point out that we're not just electric customer service, we're providing customer service for both electric,
Right.
water, and sewer. It happens to be managed by an electric utility. That's where it's housed at the moment, but it's providing that function for those departments as well. So we talked about that, and I will, talk to all of these, but we talked about engineering analysis, improving quality, safety, efficiency, and really tying into OMS, outage management system, and geographic information system, and IVR. So the IVR will continue to be an evolution. And day to day, like I said, you're not going to see a huge advantage from that. It will really come in large when we get into the storm situation. The other key thing about the engineering analysis piece is the fourth bullet down says arc flash.
Yeah.
So arc flash is the size and impact and power of that flash that's experienced during a ground fault or a face-to-face fault that our workers could be exposed to. So the engineering
safety.
analysis will really help us understand how many kilocalories or calories, if you will, of energy they stand to absorb from that flash. Make sure we have the right personal protective equipment for them to be able to work in that environment.
That is
That's
important.
very important. So
Absolutely.
You really have to do that. It's a regulatory requirement to understand arc flash and have your people properly protected. It's also important that we can able to forecast and manage if we're going to add a new load. For example, if we're going to add a new large hotel or large infrastructure or a large generating unit, large solar field, how will the system behave? Will it absorb that load? Can it handle it? approvals to do that, that's already being done. So this gives you a sense of how many utilities are doing it in average management. Valuable regardless of weather, but of course more important during storms, and which will right down the line. So I think it's probably, we've probably been around a lot of this already, you're probably ready to go home. So I'll yield the floor back. We do have yet one more item, if you want to see it, but it's in your notes, and the public has it, it's a lot of data.
Oh, what the heck?
We don't have to go through it in great detail tonight if you want, don't want to, but it gives you a sense of elections, where we are on a year-to-date basis, and how many payments we're handling in cash, which are roughly 2,200 per month. The receivables, the aging report, we can see that today we're running at about 2.1% that are 30 to 60 days or and longer. We've seen some improvements, but we're still looking at sizable receivable. Those of you that have your own businesses, you're probably somewhat familiar with this. That kind of information.
In the future, could you make this font a little bigger for those of us who refuse to wear readers?
Yes, we can. We're starting to track how many calls are handled by the IVR.
Yeah,
That's there. So there's a lot of data here. We won't go through in detail. You have it to.
it's on the website.
But the important thing is that unlike where we were years ago, we're a metric-driven organization more and more today than we were in the past. We try to have data and make decisions that are supported by the data and also by public feedback and commissioner feedback as well. We're not just guessing at things. We have data, not all the time, but many times we have data behind it, which gives a good sense of how the organization is behaving. Now, by that, I don't mean the people. I mean the number of transactions we're handling, how much money we're owed, where the money is, and how it's going.
All right, are there any questions, comments before we wrap this?
I really appreciate all
Yeah.
of this, and it's good to, I wanted all of us to be on the same page, and then to know about the little black holes and those that have been fixed, and like we all know, a consistent message to tell our constituents. So this is
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Yeah, as,
Thanks for all your hard work.
yeah, really. I love the fact, Nanette, that you call up and make sure, like, you test the system.
Oh, test but verify.
That's right.
Test and right, trust but verify. So really, thank you very much. And, as we all know, the electric utility is one of the most important pieces of our little city here. And we are one of the faces to the public. Everybody has to interact with the utilities. So the more user friendly, the more personal we can be. And we appreciate very much, I'm sure, the fact that you are looking towards the future to, to perhaps, hire more people, get it off as automated. But in the meantime, thank you very much. Commissioner Malega has a comment.
I do. The phone number I was referencing is 877-454-4480. That's an old phone number that still works. Call it says, thank you for calling. Hi, Franco. Is that your phone number? Oh, okay.
That is what they call a vanity number for outages only.
For outages only.
Put together years and years ago, I think before I got here and before I got.
Okay.
So this routes to the outage line.
It's not going to get you anywhere to where you need to pay a bill or anything. Okay. That tells you how long I've been calling. I'm one of those people.
One of those annoying.
Really pleased to hear the progress on the outbound information. I think that will help a lot in the call incoming down and in keeping people happy. They like being informed.
He will never be happy, but at least they'll have less to complain about.
We hope they'd be happy.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, by somebody,
Y'all want to, there we go.
Vice Mayor
I don't know, we need some discussion.
Robinson. Yes. Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you very much.
I don't have my card. so-
Call us with questions.